Life sometimes gives us incredible surprises, but most people think that such things only happen to others and will never affect them. She thought so too, but now she was puzzled as to what was happening. A slender blonde girl woke up in bed next to a naked man. It looks like she fell asleep while reading a novel and is now having a lucid dream. The previous evening, the dark-haired girl had been reading a book with rapture, worrying about the characters. The mother-in-law is so cruel. It's too much even for a novel. She was indignant. That's why the heroes of this work got divorced. It dawned on the girl. Get a divorce. A man with pleasant features handed over a piece of paper for the woman to sign. After receiving the divorce notice, Ellen used snake venom to induce a miscarriage in Layla. And she succeeded. Daughter-in-law Layla lost her child in the womb. Later, when Marlborough became king and found out about this, he became very angry. He ordered that this Villainess be seized and executed, which was immediately carried out. She was burned alive and died a horrible death, a cursed witch. Oh, how I want to sleep. The girl decided that it was time to wrap things up and go rest. That's right. Since she fell asleep like that with a book in her hands, it really was a dream. Excuse me. She politely called to the man next to her, but the man instantly turned to her and was indignant that she was addressing him like that. Didn't she recognize her own husband? But the girl was surprised by what he answered her. But while she was thinking that this fact was not important at all now, the young man got out of bed and continued to be indignant about how she could forget that he was Count Philippe Maurice, her husband. Watching the Count leave, the girl recognized the name. It turns out that this was the father-in-law of Layla, the main character of the book Layla's Crown, which she read before going to bed. Wait, then I'm Ellen, she asked. Damn. Even in her dream, she got the role of the evil mother-in-law. It would have been better if she had been the main character. But then the Count returned to the room, and Ellen's eyes saw a remarkable sight. She immediately changed her mind, deciding that being a mother-in-law was better, because the man came out of the bathroom with a naked torso and wet hair, which he was drying with a towel. Don't imagine anything. This night will not erase our signatures from the divorce papers, said the Count. Hearing the words about divorce, the girl realized that she was really in a dream. That's right. Then Ellen said she'd sign the divorce papers if he spent the night with her. But this night had to be the same as their wedding night. That was her condition. Remember twice, she said to her stunned husband. Philip noticed that the Countess had no shame at all, and yet he agreed to her terms, handing her the divorce papers. He added that the final papers would soon be ready, but since he no longer loved her, he would not kiss her. This is exactly the same scene from the book. Count Philip Morris and the villain Ellen spend that very night, but there is still one more time left. So what? It's just a dream, and it would be stupid to refuse such a handsome man. The bright sunlight woke the sleeping woman, and she stretched, wondering what time it was and where her phone was. Her hand accidentally touched something warm and soft in the bed next to her. She opened her eyes in amazement, completely awakened by the surprise. What's going on? Why is there a man in her house and in her bed too? She lifted the blanket and found him completely naked and herself in a thin slip. Realizing that the room was different, the clothes were different. Everything was different, and there was a man nearby. The woman screamed hysterically. What's the matter, madam? The man woke up from her scream and sat up in bed. At that moment, she was not thinking clearly and was only thinking about how not to leave the one who attacked her unpunished. So she kicked the man in the chest with all her might, causing him to instantly end up on the floor next to the bed. He asked in shock why she was behaving like this, to which the girl indignantly replied, how dare he even ask about it? She furiously asked him if he had done this to her, to which he replied that of course he had, and besides, she herself had wanted it. But the woman did not understand why she would do this, and then he added that she demanded and begged. At this point, she became completely indignant, and the man added that she called what happened between them magnificent. In the midst of their arguments, the doors to the room swung open without knocking, and several maids appeared before them, asking what had happened and asking Madame to calm down. One of the girls even stood in front of her, spreading her arms as if protecting another person. Realization fell on her like a dark veil. She is a madam, which means this is not a dream. Oh my God, what a mess! The man finally came to his senses, his beautiful purple eyes sparkling. The woman could not take her eyes off him and wondered whether she should expect punishment from him. Or he had already spared her. The woman's gaze lingered on the man's strong, naked torso. "Some ridiculous excuses will not change my decision. The application has already been sent to court," the man said firmly. "That is, no matter what she does, from today on they begin a period of reflection before the divorce." This marriage was hell for Philip, and he had enough. He was not going to endure it any longer. "I hope that 100 days will fly by quickly," the Count said, and left the room. Ellen stood there, staring after him in a daze. Already closing the door behind him, the man added that the children would be back in a week, and that she should not dare touch them, because he did not intend to turn a blind eye to this any longer. The maids also hurried out of the room, saying that they would wait outside. When she was finally alone in the room, she had some realization of what was happening. After looking around the room, the woman noticed a table with a mirror at the opposite end, and when she approached him, her eyes widened in surprise. "Who is this woman?" A thin blonde with huge blue eyes looked at her in the mirror. It turns out that everything that happened now was not a dream. The final understanding of the situation has come. And in fact, she is in the body of the villain Ellen from the novel she read. Thinking that she needed to check everything immediately, she turned around abruptly. And opening the door of the room, she went out into the corridor where the maids were waiting. The girls bowed before their mistress in fear, awaiting instructions. "Where did that man go? And who am I, anyway?" the woman asked, not at all embarrassed by their absurdity. But what confused her was that the voice in which she said it sounded rude and frightening. One of the maids replied that the Count was in his office, and the woman again became convinced that she really was now the villain Ellen. Not fully believing it, she asked again if she really was Countess Ellen Morris. The maids all fell to their knees and begged for forgiveness, because now that the divorce papers had been sent to court, she was now Ellen Bourbon, the daughter of the Duke of Renoir. At first, the Countess was surprised why they were asking for forgiveness, although they had done nothing. But then she realized that here she was the villain and must behave accordingly, so she ordered these worthless creatures to immediately return to work. As she walked back to her room, she wondered if this was too cruel, even if she tried to sound like a villain. As she closed the door, she heard the maid saying that such a thing was impossible, and she thought that she had offended them with her words after all. But the girls, on the contrary, were discussing the fact that the Countess had neither pulled out their hair nor whipped them, and in general was too kind to them today. It seemed that after signing the divorce papers, she had become an angel. The Countess, with a strange feeling in her soul, realized that they did not hate her, but how much Ellen had mocked them then. With such an appearance, all doors are open for her. Why did she have to become a villain? In any case, since she is really here, we need to understand the situation well so as not to be killed, like in the novel. And to begin with, she decided that she needed to get along with the maids. At that moment, there was a knock at the door, and the maid announced that breakfast was ready. The Countess, trying to keep her voice calm, allowed them to enter. Soon a table appeared in the room, completely filled with all kinds of delicious food. Ellen cut a piece of meat from her plate and put it into her mouth with interest. "Oh my God, this is a work of art." The woman ate the food with pleasure. "It's so delicious. Everything is just the way she likes it. Everything is incredibly delicious." Soon the plates in front of the Countess were completely empty, and it was time for coffee. Ellen sipped her coffee and reflected on the situation. If she weren't a villain, it would be nice to live here. When else would she have such luxury? After finishing her meal, Ellen announced that she was going to go for a walk outside. "Yes, madam," the maids bowed politely, not daring to contradict their mistress. The Countess noted with surprise that she only had to say the word, and everything was ready. Namely, a hanger with dresses for the walk appeared in the room. She looked at the clothes with interest, choosing what exactly she wanted to wear. Ellen's gaze caught on one dress. It seemed to be the most suitable. She picked up the sky blue dress. She definitely liked it. Right next to the building, there was a beautiful flower garden with fragrant plants. Ellen was delighted to see such a beautiful garden and the view around. And then I noticed a young man with scissors. It looks like this gardener is looking after the garden. The young man also noticed the lady watching him, and the next moment, he ran away with all possible speed. What was that? Was he really afraid of her? Ellen was taken aback. "Call him?" she heard an unfamiliar voice ask, and she turned around in surprise to see who it belonged to. A handsome young man with long red hair stood in front of her. In the first seconds, she asked in surprise who he was. The young man introduced himself as Iregov Mild and added that he had been protecting her since she was 10 years old. And he noted with a grin that they had agreed not to joke like that again. Did Ellen really joke like that before the Countess realized with surprise? But it was better for her. How boring. Ellen turned around and continued her walk. And although the Countess walked, calmly enjoying the walk, accompanied by her maids, now the knight also followed her. "Why are you following me?" The woman couldn't stand it and turned to him. To which Mild replied with a charming smile that he was her faithful guardian. That's right. Ellen had a shadow knight following her everywhere. And when she incurred the wrath of King Marlborough and was seized for execution, he resisted and died by Philip's sword. His name was only mentioned at the beginning of the novel, and then he was simply referred to as Ellen's Shadow. Mild, so, well, at least she already has one ally. Waking up one morning, Countess Morris sat up in bed with difficulty. Her back ached, which is not surprising. She lay in bed for a whole week. Her execution is scheduled to take place in 3 years, and what will happen if she changes the future? Ellen was punished for torturing the main characters, so maybe if she does the opposite, she can survive, because no one would sentence someone to death without a reason. First, she will try to improve her relationship with her children, who are returning from their honeymoon today. If life in this house becomes pleasant, then the tension will subside. She just needed to try to be gentler with them, the woman decided. According to the family law of the Kingdom of Cigarettes, a final divorce requires 2 applications, an application for divorce and an application to confirm it. A week ago, Philip filed a divorce petition in court. From this day on, the couple must spend 100 days in thought. All these days they must spend together, no matter how much they do not like it. After reading this in the divorce papers, Ellen thought hard. A second petition for confirmation of divorce may be filed with the court at any time during this period. It will be sealed and will not be opened by the judge until the last day of the cooling-off period, when the final judgment will be made. If at least one of the spouses wants a divorce, it will be approved if neither of them files an application or both cancel it. The divorce will be annulled. But the division of property during a divorce is decided by the head of the family. And the woman really didn't like this turn of events. In the novel, the Count gives Ellen a small 2-story house, which seems like a lot. But compared to the Count's fortune, it's a drop in the ocean. If she doesn't beg to cancel the divorce and earns his favor a little, he may give more. But there is an even better plan: earn more money before the divorce and then live in luxury. Having finished with her thoughts, Ellen put her seal on the document she had just read. Then, through the closed door, she called her faithful knight Sir Mild. The young man immediately appeared at the door of the room, ready to serve his mistress. "Send this to the court." The Countess handed him the signed documents. However, before taking them, Mild asked her if she was sure about it. "If I divorce, will you still protect me, Sir Mild?" She asked the knight with a smile, to which he answered in the affirmative, because he had sworn to protect his lady all his life. A little embarrassed by such a frank display of affection, the Countess ordered the knight to go. "Okay, then I'll go." The man took the documents and bowed politely to the lady. Now, besides Ellen, she has one more person she simply must save. While Mild was leaving her room, the maid, on the contrary, was entering. Ellen asked her how much time was left before the children arrived, to which the girl replied that it was about 2 hours. And then she asked whether it was planned to meet them near the main entrance, receiving confirmation of her words. The Countess remarked that she too should prepare herself, which made the maid very frightened. Looking at the girl trembling in front of her, Ellen could not understand what she was so afraid of. At first, it was awkward because of the misunderstandings, but now, after a week, she has gotten used to it. She will move out of here in 100 days anyway, so there is no need to worry. Ellen spent the next few hours preparing to welcome the arriving children with the help of numerous maids. In the end, the woman was completely collected and dressed in a beautiful dress, with her hair and makeup done, and even she herself admired how beautiful she was. Looking at herself in the mirror, she thought that Ellen had such a bright, beautiful appearance, and when her life here ended, she would definitely start a new one that suited her better. Such thoughts sounded like a very well-thought-out plan for the future life, and the girl smiled contentedly. "Take off all the jewelry from your head," she said to the maid, intending to change something in her appearance. However, the maids, not accustomed to such behavior from their mistress, were very much and clearly surprised by this. But they did not dare to contradict the lady, and immediately carried out her order. The heavy, uncomfortable jewelry bothered Ellen. She felt much better without it. Everything was ready, and all the inhabitants of the house were eagerly awaiting the arrival of the guests. Ellen was the last to arrive at the front door, and all the servants of the house were already there, ceremoniously greeting their mistress. One of the men looked at the woman approaching them without taking his eyes off her. Ellen Morris was so beautiful and graceful in his eyes that he could not help but admire her. He entered into a marriage of convenience with 18-year-old Ellen. At first, she had no complaints about the fact that he had an adopted son, Marlborough. But when she realized how talented Marlborough was, she began to change. She was afraid that her own son would not become the heir to the earldom. No matter how he tried to calm her down, Ellen didn't believe him, and every day she pestered Marlborough more and more. What she didn't know was that Marlborough was actually the king's secret son. But Philip couldn't tell her that. He had sworn an oath to the king to keep the secret. He can no longer continue to live with a woman like her, and she can no longer live with him. To be honest, Philip only tolerated this because of her pretty face, the man thought, all the while looking at the woman standing next to him. Who else can stand such a cruel woman as his wife? However, a very sweet, kind smile suddenly appeared on Ellen's beautiful face, and this alerted the Count that this was happening to her. It seemed that she was up to something again. Turning away, the man thought that his wife looked especially beautiful today. Soon a richly decorated carriage drawn by 2 horses appeared at the palace gates, and although the Count was all in anticipation, he could not help but feel someone's intent gaze on him. Turning around, he was stunned by the fact that Ellen was looking him straight in the eye. Unable to bear it, he asked why she was looking at him so intently. The girl embarrassedly replied that she had recently hit him. At first, the man was taken aback by such frank words. How dare she say such things in front of everyone? She is now a scoundrel, and his reputation is being dragged down. I wanted to make sure you were okay, the woman added with a smile. Philip knew that this scoundrel had fencing skills no worse than a knight's, and she was also good at hand-to-hand combat. She beat him, knowing where to hit to cause the most pain, but Ellen immediately interrupted his thoughts, lowering her eyes and saying that it would not happen again. And although she pronounced these words clearly, Philip was taken aback and asked again what she said. Without waiting for an answer, he asked something else, why she did it. I was scared. Ellen's answer was simple, and she looked him in the eye openly. Her words made the Count even more taken aback, and the girl explained that she woke up and saw a man next to her, and that's why she got scared. The man could not find the words to respond to his wife's statement. Ellen continued that she had momentarily forgotten what had happened the night before, and Philip remarked that she had insisted on it herself when she signed the papers. The Countess mysteriously drawled that in a dream everything can be forgotten, and thought to herself that in the original he was a reserved character, so why was he so curious now? You were pleased, judging by your words. It was wonderful, Philip said, covering his mouth. His words made Ellen angry, which meant wonderful. What exactly? And she wondered if she should hit him again. The servants, who became involuntary witnesses to this quarrel, pretended that they knew nothing. You really don't understand. You said it yourself. The man was indignant, starting to shout. And Ellen couldn't stand it any longer, and she began to get angrier and angrier. She grabbed the man by the lapels of his jacket and pulled him forcefully towards her. You're a pervert. What kind of questions are you asking? The Countess whispered angrily in his ear. She said it didn't matter, so why was he continuing this conversation? Only Philip was shocked that Ellen had enjoyed their closeness so much that night, and now she was so vehemently denying it. She's obviously lying to avoid a divorce. Does she really think he'll trust her again? At this time, the carriage had already driven up to the house and young people got out of it. Oh my God, wow, what a beautiful heroine, my daughter-in-law, the Countess mentally admired. Seeing them in person, she realized that Ellen had indeed done very badly. Even if she is a villain, how can one offend such a beauty? But now she will support her in everything. Layla, the Countess said in greeting, but her voice and expression were so eerie that the young girl answered in the affirmative in fear. Welcome home, Ellen added with a wide smile, spreading her arms in a welcoming embrace. And the next moment she pulled her daughter-in-law to her chest. And although the woman's words were quite friendly, the girl was still very scared and terrified by such an attitude. Having finished with the hugs, the Countess told Layla to rest today adding that they would see each other at tea. Ellen was genuinely happy to see the guests, and especially her beautiful daughter-in-law, but everyone around her was acting wary. Having finished greeting the girl, Countess Morris turned to Marlborough, noting that since he had arrived, it would be appropriate to say hello. "I'm back, Father, Mother." The young man bowed ceremoniously, and with him his young wife. Philip watched this time in bewilderment, so much so that Ellen had to nudge him with her elbow so that he would finally tell the children to come into the house. "Come in quickly, I have prepared black tea and pies," the Countess urged them with a smile. Everyone present was shocked by Countess Maurice's behavior. Philip was at a loss to understand why she was behaving this way. Marlborough was worried about what had happened during his absence, and Layla thought that this made Ellen look even scarier than before. After some time, the guests and hosts sat down in the living room waiting for tea. But first, a palace appeared in the room with a cart full of various gifts. Seeing him, Ellen remembered that the butler Domingos was supposed to die soon. According to the original, he would die after 3 accidents, and then Ellen would laughingly say that the annoying old man had finally died. That same night, she would get drunk and stay with Sir Mild. But if she talks about the future now, she will seem strange, but she also cannot pretend that she does not know about the upcoming accidents. "Domingos, are you going to buy some camellia oil?" she asked the servant. The butler was taken aback by the fact that this information was known to the lady, and the Countess continued to say that he might encounter bandits, so he should send a messenger or take a bodyguard, and besides, judging by his physiognomy, he might collide with a horse, so he should be more careful, especially when he ran into strangers at the tavern. After her short speech, the butler bowed and thanked the lady for her concern, but the woman realized that he did not believe her, which was quite expected. Then she decided to ask him when he was going shopping, and the servant immediately replied that in 3 days, when he would pick up an order at Madame Edez's boutique, where the best goods of the Renoir Company were sold. Ellen was surprised to hear her last name before her marriage in the butler's speech. "Isn't this your brother's company?" Philip noted warily, and Ellen realized with delight that she had a brother. Although the Count added that with such hatred as theirs, one could consider that she did not. Then the Countess decided to somehow get around this delicate issue, and her gaze fell upon a mountain of gifts. And at that time, Layla was looking at her attentively, as if she wanted to say something. It seemed that these gifts were intended for her from her daughter-in-law, Ellen decided. The novel said that the heroes prepared a gift for Ellen and Philip, but Ellen found a reason to find fault and expressed all her dissatisfaction. But this time everything will be different, because the mother-in-law is entirely on the daughter-in-law's side. At that moment, the girl handed the Countess a beautifully wrapped gift. Ellen was very happy about this and decided that she should show maximum joy. As she handed over the gifts, Layla quietly said that she hoped they both liked them. Having untied the ribbons and opened the box, the Countess took out the long-awaited gift. It turned out to be a delightful blue robe. There was no need to pretend. The delight burst out of itself. "How soft and beautiful it is," Ellen admired, examining the gift. She held the robe to herself as if trying it on, and spun around in all directions with pleasure. Count Philip, as well as Marlborough, looked at the Countess with barely restrained laughter. So funny did she look at that moment, so much so that the butler became worried about their condition, and Ellen gratefully asked her daughter-in-law where she got this wonderful robe, and the girl was very happy that she liked it. "You have worked hard, rest and feel at home." Ellen tenderly took her daughter-in-law's hands, from which the eyes of the touched girl filled with tears, and the word "Mom" flew from her lips. The men watched this scene with mute astonishment, and Ellen added that Lila should let her know if Marlborough upset her. "If he upsets you, I will punish him." The Countess gave the young man a threatening look. Philip felt the awkwardness of the situation and tried to change it by asking what happened to his gift. The butler immediately apologized and opened another box with a gift for the Count. In exactly the same box lay exactly the same blue robe, only a man's. Philip thanked them for the gift and immediately told the children the news that they had signed divorce papers a week ago. This stunned and unpleasantly surprised Layla and Marlborough, who did not expect such changes in the family at all. The Count added that when the period of reflection expires, Ellen will leave this house, although it is not a fact that she will leave after the expiration of the period, so it will not be possible to wear these robes. And when the Count ordered Domingos to take the robes, The Countess was indignant at why he wanted to take her thing. Philip was sure that it would be better this way, but Ellen was of the opposite opinion, because she was going to wear it, which made the Earl think that she was going to call off the divorce. "Whoever said that I want to cancel it, you are rejoicing too soon," the woman said, which took him by surprise. But if the Count did not want to wear his robe, he could give it to her. But Philip noticed that he had bought it to wear with her. "You said you wouldn't wear it." Ellen no longer understood anything in his words. "You're rejoicing too soon." He returned the woman's own words, and yet he explained that he also liked the robe, but if he couldn't wear it with her, he would have to take it away. "Then, Philip, we can do without yours," Ellen concluded, causing the Count to be taken aback. As Philip said, in 100 days she will leave this house forever. After the divorce, she will return to her status as the Duke's daughter, so the Count should provide her with a decent home. And let him not think about giving her a small 2-story house with cheap wallpaper. The Count did not recall saying anything about compensation, but Ellen smiled and remarked that she had simply assumed he would do so. "I'm going to go and rest. It wouldn't hurt you either," said the Countess, and she decided to herself that she would not intrude into the newlyweds' bedroom that night. The next day was sunny and bright, just right for a walk. Countess Ellen Morris, walking through the garden, was very sorry that this was not a photo zone. It would have been wonderful to take a photo in this view. "She's a real lady," the woman giggled, pleased with everything that was happening. She was soon surprised to find that it was not only Sir Mild who was laughing, and the Countess asked what was the matter. The knight apologized sheepishly, and the Countess asked again what had happened to make him laugh so much. "You just look happy, madam," Mild remarked with a smile. His words even made Ellen feel embarrassed. Was he really happy because of her good mood? She can't let a kind man like Mild die. Layla is having a tea party today, so Ellen needs to make a good impression on her friends. They are going to gather in the garden, but where is it? The Countess did not know the exact place. The knight asked what the lady was looking for, and she replied that Layla was having tea today, but she was not in sight. She said that the place would be strewn with roses, so the Countess assumed that it was somewhere around here. So that's why the maids were so quiet, Mild realized. Mild? You didn't know either, the Countess suddenly realized. Okay, it really could have been hidden, but how much Ellen tormented everyone. But she was not about to give up and asked where the knight thought they could have tea, to which he suggested the backyard. The young lady's friends are commoners, so if they do have tea, it will most likely be in the gazebo by the lake. In that case, Ellen ordered to take her there, although the knight, noticing that it was far, suggested taking a horse or a carriage. The woman thought in the original Ellen created a ruckus at this meeting. She walked purposefully towards the girls who were calmly chatting over tea. At that time, the Countess was in a particularly bad mood and had no intention of hiding it. All the tea, all the snacks and dishes flew from the table to the ground. But poor Layla got the worst of it from Countess Morris. This time, she will come up quietly and politely tell them to have a good time together. Therefore, in order to carry out her plan, the Countess wanted to approach on foot and quietly, which is what she and the knight did. Soon, on the road to the lake, they met several maids with baskets in their hands. "Where are you going?" Ellen called out to the girls, and they froze in fear. Ellen asked what they were carrying in the baskets, but the frightened maids insisted that it was nothing special. "Open them, come on," the Countess ordered with a frightening smile. Although the maids were very frightened, they did not dare to disobey the direct order of their mistress. The baskets contained a variety of food, and Ellen, realizing that they were carrying food for Layla's tea party, ordered the baskets to be given to her. She wanted to take the food herself, since she was also going to Layla, but the maids were perplexed because the baskets were too heavy for the mistress. "It's not scary because Mild is with me," Ellen smiled. Soon, Countess Morris and her faithful knight were already approaching the gazebo by the lake. A cheerful female laugh could be heard from there, and the knight asked whether to announce her arrival. But Ellen refused, since she had come on an unofficial visit. The closer she got, the more nervous she became, not knowing what to say. She might say that she enjoyed meeting them and is glad to see them having a good time, and add that she brought a cake and a pie and asked to take care of them, Layla. Something like this will probably do, Duchess Maurice decided. "Don't talk about my mother like that." Her daughter-in-law's indignant voice interrupted her thoughts. Ellen turned around instantly and motioned for Marlborough to remain silent. And at this time she herself, trying to step quietly, approached the gazebo. but she didn't go inside, stopping not far from the entrance so that she couldn't be seen. In the original, Layla's friends were definitely commoners or children from rich families because of Ellen's antics. None of the daughters of aristocrats visited the Count's house. "I asked you not to say that if you only knew how good she is," the girl almost cried, responding to the guests' comments that the Countess was terrible and that she herself needed to come to her senses. But one of the girls insisted that this was not the case and that Ellen Morris's reputation was already known. "No, my mother is good to me. She greeted me when we came back from our honeymoon," Layla insisted. The Countess, listening to everything from her hiding place, admired the fact that the girl still protected her, although Ellen behaved very badly and mentally promised to treat her better. But the guests did not calm down, pointing out that at their first meeting, Layla turned pale and trembled because Ellen had frightened her with her greeting, and everyone knew that. "I just haven't earned her approval yet." The girl became despondent under the pressure of her friends. But in any case, she shouldn't worry because they will soon get divorced. The girls were interested in how the newlyweds spent their wedding night, which stunned Layla. And the girlfriends just giggled nastily when they saw the girl's reaction. "What were you doing in bed? Tell me more," the friends pressed, despite Layla's condition. And they immediately became indignant that she couldn't share this with her friends, because no one else was friends with her. And because of her evil mother-in-law, she had no friends among the nobility. Ellen was angry. "How could you tease such a sweet girl like Layla?" The impudent girls did not calm down, assuring her that she had to treat them well in order to continue being friends with them. And by the way, they could take these dresses for themselves. But when Layla answered in the affirmative, one of her friends asked if there was anything else, because she had a lot of things, and with a mother-in-law like that, you can't really wear jewelry. Poor Layla was so taken aback by the impudence that she couldn't answer. But the girls took her silence as a refusal and reproached her for valuing her jewelry more than her friends. They considered their behavior to be completely normal and demanded everything and more, expressing dissatisfaction even with the insufficient amount of food. "Layla, you're having tea with friends here." The ominous voice of Countess Ellen Morris rang out in the gazebo. The atmosphere at the tea party immediately changed, and it seemed as if even the darkness thickened at the table. Ellen added in her ominous voice that she was glad they were having such a good time. The guests were seriously scared, so much so that they started shaking, which is not surprising. "I slightly missed this. I didn't have time to prepare in advance," the Countess explained in the same voice. The girls bowed politely, but it was clear that their shoulders were shaking slightly, and their fear of the Countess did not leave them. "You came, Mom." Layla also greeted Ellen, but she very persistently asked her to stand aside. "I brought cake and pie instead of maids," she returned to the impudent girls. Initially, she planned to say this in a friendly manner, but now she changed her mind. "Here, enjoy." Plates of food were thrown at the girls. At such moments, she was comfortable in the role of a villain. The Countess screamed irritably, calling the girls impudent. How dare they treat sweet Layla like that? She heard everything they said. Do they really see her as a simpleton just because she is kind? The guests immediately fell to their knees, repenting that they were wrong and asking forgiveness for their behavior. "I tried to be friendly with you, but have you become so spoiled that you don't see any boundaries?" Ellen demanded that they apologize. "Countess, please have mercy," the girls fawned. And looking at their frightened faces, Ellen only grew angrier, clutching the basket of food tightly in her hands. "Layla doesn't need friends like you." In a fit of emotion, the basket flew at the impudent girl. Ellen wanted to do something else that was so in keeping with her image, but was suddenly stopped. Someone's strong hand grabbed her by the waist, preventing her from doing what she had planned. "Let me go, Mild. I said let me go." The woman tried to break free from the man's tenacious hands. But the man did not calm down, despite the Countess's cries that they needed to be taught an even greater lesson. "Madam, control yourself," the man finally said, and Ellen was taken aback. She realized that the one holding her was not her faithful knight, but Count Philip Morris. Having said that he had seen everything that had happened, the man threw his still struggling wife over his shoulder. While the woman was resisting, he said he looked over the wall to see what was going on and saw her behaving so unceremoniously. Carrying away the enraged Countess, Philip ordered the maids to clean up. He also noticed that Layla's friends were completely demoralized and broken. It's a pity that the tea party was ruined. Forgive me, the Count apologized to the girls. Outraged by this behavior, Ellen stood up and once again shouted at the girls that they were very lucky and that they should not dare bother her daughter-in-law anymore. Never play with our Layla again, and don't mess with her, just try to catch my eye. The Countess's voice became quieter and quieter as the Count carried her into the house. A short time later, they were already in Ellen's room. The Countess was not going to forgive her husband for such unprincipled behavior towards her. She really tried to be good to Layla this time, and the Count agreed with her words, although he did not believe them. And anyway, after the mess she made at the tea party, she shouldn't even mention it. But Ellen rightly pointed out that this was not her choice. The Count was not going to listen to any more excuses from his wife. The man headed for the door, and the Countess asked to listen to her in order to understand what had happened. "I will sort out the situation myself." The Count's voice sounded strained. He left the room, closing the door behind him, after which a characteristic click was heard. Ellen instantly rushed to the exit and pulled the door handle, confirming her assumptions. "Why did you lock me in?" she screamed, knocking hard on the door, from behind which the Count's voice was heard, explaining that it was for the safety of the maids while he was away. But the Countess sincerely did not understand why she would harm the maids and was very outraged by the situation. "You've done this before. I'll be back soon. Just cool down," Philip replied, and his steps began to fade. "You're a fool, an idiot." The woman was indignant. "You locked her up without even knowing the whole truth." An hour later, Philip returned and reported that everyone had their own version of events, and Lila's friends said that Ellen suddenly showed up and started acting up. But Lila herself admitted that they were too harsh, but still apologized. Ellen lamented that her daughter-in-law was too soft towards the impudent girls, and Philip added that she would sort things out with her friends and apologize to the Countess. Having calmed down a little, the Countess decided that now she needed to find new friends for Layla. "Have you forgotten, or are you giving poison and then treating it right away?" the Count asked in surprise, thereby surprising Ellen as well. "After all, it was she who drove out all of Layla's noble friends," the Count added. "Oh, that's right." The Countess had to bite her tongue because his words were true. Having said this, Philip silently left the room, and the woman choked from such impudence, locked her in, and didn't even apologize yet. Oh well, she'll soon leave this house for good. She just needs to find herself a place to live. The next day, Ellen went with Mild to inspect the houses that Philip had prepared. Of the 10 options, they first looked at 9, and then went to look at the last house, which Ellen received according to the plot of the novel. The street was littered with garbage. The road was narrow and the carriage could not pass, so they had to walk. Did the Count seriously suggest this area as a possible place of residence for Ellen, no matter how handsome Philip is? After this, he loses all charm. She'd better hurry up and secure her assets before the divorce than let herself be thrown out into a place like that. Ellen walked down the alley, lost in thought, but she couldn't help but notice that the homeless people around her had become noticeably more animated. Do they want to provoke them into a conflict, whether she should run away or fight? At that moment, the homeless, barefoot people huddled together and were already purposefully walking towards the noblewoman. The street was so narrow that it would be difficult for the Countess to escape. Then she would have to fight. Ellen knew it was the right decision, but she still felt uneasy, although she was not alone, but with her faithful knight, Sir Mild. One of the homeless people dropped a glass bottle, and it rolled down the sidewalk with a crash, quite frightening them. Ellen heard frightened screams behind her and turned around in surprise. Realizing that the Countess had noticed them, the people, who had clearly been planning an attack just a second ago, began to run away from her. Countess Morris and her knight were left standing in the middle of the empty alley, blown by the cool wind. What just happened? Were these people really avoiding them? The Countess was confused. It wasn't enough to be on the ground, and now they're running away. Maybe I should catch these scoundrels and teach them a lesson, Mild asked the lady. It took a while, but Ellen realized that these people had no intention of attacking. They were simply afraid of the famous Countess Morris. But what terrible thing had she done with such thoughts? The Countess continued on her way. On the way, she saw more poor people who didn't even dare to look at her. And at that moment, when she drew level with them, a begging hand reached out to her. "Madam, we are hungry. At least a piece of bread. Show mercy." The little boy stretched out his pleadingly folded hands to her. The woman next to him looked up at the stopped noblewoman. and the next moment, when she realized who was in front of them, her eyes widened in horror. She covered her son, asking him to be quiet because it was Countess Morris. But tears appeared in the boy's eyes because he was very hungry, and now he was also scared. The beggar woman asked the lady to forgive them because the child had not eaten since yesterday, and asked for mercy. How cruel was Countess Ellen Morris that even children are so afraid of her. It's better to pretend you didn't notice them, that way she'll help. But after a few steps, the woman stopped, realizing that she could not leave them without help. "Leave before anyone sees you." Ellen turned sharply to the woman, putting her hand forward, and a pure gold coin fell into the surprised woman's hands. The beggar woman fell prostrate before the Countess, sincerely thanking her for such mercy. The next moment, picking up the child in her arms, she ran away at a quick pace. Well, Ellen thought, and Mild was looking at her strangely, without looking away. The knight explained that this was the first time he had seen Countess Morris give anything to the poor. And the woman realized with horror that she had reacted too emotionally. Then she said she just got them out of sight the quickest way possible, or maybe she should have, as Mild says, beat them up and chased them away. "No, of course not," the knight answered calmly, holding back his surprise. And Ellen realized that Mild was not a villain. He was simply following the orders of Countess Morris. But in the original story, the faithful knight Ellen was slandered by bad people. And in the end, he died along with his mistress, protecting her until his last breath. "Okay, lead me on," Ellen ordered, deciding not to think about it anymore. Mild silently accepted the lady's order, and they continued on their way. Soon they arrived at their destination and found themselves in front of the right door. It was a small 2-story house, which looked quite normal from the outside. They also looked inside, and things weren't so rosy there. The woman realized that there was not enough space to fit all her dresses. It seemed that Ellen had to sell them, no matter how much she liked it. The knight was also surprised that the Count wanted to send the Countess to such an inappropriate place, where he even found this hut. But Ellen added optimistically that in the worst case, he would live on the first floor and she on the second. "Madam, you cannot live here," the knight responded emotionally. But the Countess said that she had no choice if she still received this house. Mild was genuinely confused about whether the lady really needed a divorce, and Ellen reminded him that she had already sent the papers, but wondered why Mild didn't want it. "Your family will not approve of this," the knight replied. But the Countess was interested in what the knight himself thought about this. And when he replied that he didn't care and that he just wanted her to be happy, she was very surprised. Did she really seem happy to him when they were at the estate? To this, Mildew had no answer to Countess Ellen Morris. Ellen herself understood the whole situation and asked the knight to take better care of the move. Not wanting to give up so easily, Mild asked the lady to think again about the divorce. But Ellen had already made up her mind and did not regret it. She also asked the dejected knight not to worry about it. She would never live in such a house. Having decided that their business here was finished, the Countess ordered them to return to the estate. The carriage moved slowly forward along the sunlit street. "In the future, our house will be in the center of the city," Ellen suddenly said, which greatly surprised her knight. And she added that, as she recalled, he said that he was not going to change jobs. Therefore, since they are going to live together, this will be their home, the Countess noted, to which Mild smiled sincerely. The carriage passed a small group of people, and the woman could not pay attention to them. She remembered warning the butler to beware of robbers in blue masks. Now she understands that today is exactly the day when he was going shopping. Ellen asked Mild if he knew where Mrs. Heads's boutique was, and was told that it was a little outside the city. It seems that the butler Domingos was going there today at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It is unknown, and it is unknown whether he will show up for the meeting in person. And then the Countess ordered us to go have lunch and then head to the boutique at 4 o'clock. Having outlined a plan for the rest of the day, Countess Ellen Morris and her faithful knight set out to carry it out. That same day, Ellen and Mild left the restaurant after lunch. The Countess asked what time it was and received the answer that it was already about 4 o'clock. And that meant it was time to go to Mrs. Heads's boutique. The knight volunteered to organize everything. Already approaching the place, in one of the small alleys, Ellen saw a crowd of people. And at that very second, she understood everything, shouting to stop the carriage. But it all happened so quickly that Mild didn't have time to react, while Ellen grabbed the umbrella and jumped to the ground herself. The knight was forced to brake sharply, risking harm to the lady's horse. However, despite Mild's cries, Ellen still jumped off the carriage. And the next moment she rushed headlong to where she saw a group of people. From there, shouts could already be heard about how this guy was so stubborn and a proposal to cut his thigh, just not kill him. In a poorly lit alley, a knife flashed in the hands of one of the bandits. Ellen, watching nearby, scolded the butler who refused to believe her words. "Hey you!" The girl decided to play it safe and headed towards the bandits. She said nothing more, but simply took action, swinging her umbrella and kicking the nearest man right in the back. What kind of woman is this? The other bandits in blue masks were taken aback. But Domingos immediately recognized the lady, asking in horror how she had ended up there, and the bandits brazenly asked who she was and what she wanted from them. "I am Countess Morris," the woman said indignantly, but they didn't listen to her, and the main bandit ordered to take her. Ellen was prepared for this and easily dodged the first attacker. The main weapon in her hands turned out to be an elegant lady's umbrella, and it was this that she thrust into the butt of the bandit who had his back to her. The Countess had a strange feeling that he had gone in too deep. The other bandits also experienced a wide range of emotions as they watched their comrade being brutally treated. "I didn't do it on purpose. I hope he will live." Ellen didn't make excuses. She decided that in such moments you need to be strong. "And you can handle the knight." Mild appeared in the alley, pushing the lady behind him. The knight was fully prepared to defend his mistress. Before the bandits pounced on them, the Countess managed to shout for Mild to take care of the left side. This battle between nobles and bandits was epic. The knight deftly wielded his sword. Ellen, in the absence of a weapon, used her own body just as deftly. "Madam, this is a martial art." Mild was surprised beyond measure because he didn't know this about the lady. "Don't get distracted. Deal with them first." The Countess didn't even turn to the knight, continuing to defend herself. However, she felt that this body was weak, and it was difficult for her to bear the blows. Mild was strong and deftly parried the blows, managing to attack himself. At this time, the main bandit was holding the butler by the collar, demanding that he give him what he had. All the other bandits began to run away in horror, realizing that they couldn't cope. And Ellen had the opportunity to help the butler by freeing him from the bandit's grip. The woman looked so feisty that Domingos was literally taken aback by the surprise. Ellen grabbed the man's arm, forcing him to follow her, leading him out of the alley. The servant tried to apologize, but Ellen was indignant that he was getting hit because of some oil. Was it really worth more than life? Stunned by the whole situation, Domingos tried to say that everything was not as the lady understood it. But at that moment, the exit from the alley was blocked by bandits, this time with daggers in their hands. Having ordered the butler to leave quickly and call for help, Ellen herself picked up a stone from the road. "Madam, you must go too." The man did not want to leave the Countess in danger. But the woman had already thrown a stone with all her might, which hit one of the bandits straight in the head. "Hurry up! Don't stand still!" Ellen shouted at the butler, and he finally obeyed. The bandits quickly approached her, threatening her with a sharp dagger. With one deft and precise movement, Ellen knocked the weapon out of the hands of the first attacker. The dagger fell with a clang onto the road, which angered the bandits even more, and they wanted to kill her with renewed vigor. Mild wanted the lady to run away, but Ellen was worried that he might die fighting alone. So she rushed into battle with renewed vigor, using her elbows and other parts of her body. And even despite her short stature, she managed to throw the bandit over her shoulder, thereby knocking him out. Wow, that was a real Olympic medal. Ellen was pleased with her actions. Having caught her breath, she discovered that there was no one else in the alley except her. Somewhere nearby, a command was given to capture them all, and the woman turned around in surprise. But when she realized who gave this order and to whom, her eyes widened even more in surprise. A whole detachment of the Count's knights was heading towards her, ready to defend their mistress. Count Philip Morris himself was nearby, riding a horse. The knights captured the bandits who did not have time to escape and tied them up. "Are you okay?" Philip dismounted and asked about the Countess's condition. Ellen wondered if he was worried about her, but didn't he hate the Countess? Although she was very surprised, she assured him that she was fine. At that moment, a painfully heartbreaking male scream was heard in the alley. It was the knights who discovered a bandit on the other side of the alley, whom Ellen dealt with using an umbrella. With one sharp movement, the knight pulled the umbrella out of the trap into which it had fallen at the behest of the Countess. Even as she watched this, Ellen thought that it seemed to be really painful and unpleasant. The faithful knight Mild was also very worried about the lady's condition, and she assured him that she was fine. However, the woman's attention was drawn to the scene that was currently taking place not far from her. There, Count Morris was talking to the butler, who was handing the gentleman an envelope. So what Domingos was holding was simply a letter, for which he essentially risked his life. Philip thanked the butler for his help, but Domingos noted that it was all thanks to the lady. The Count looked at his wife in disbelief, but was forced to acknowledge her role in this whole situation. The butler thanked the lady, but Ellen was horrified that it was too different from the original. Would something go wrong? "Are you by any chance familiar with these documents?" Philip was still trying to understand. But Ellen didn't understand what he was talking about or what these documents were. Did he mean to say that he suspected her of assault? But Philip noticed that he had not said that. "No, you suspected me." The Countess was furious at such impudence, but the Count noted that if she had been in cahoots with them, there would have been no point in her giving out such information in advance. In any case, this unusual kick was really impressive. Philip even blushed at his own words. It was like red and white roses mixing and swaying in the wind. The scene of his impressive kick flashed before the man's eyes again, and it dawned on Ellen that he was staring at her hiked-up skirt. "Then I'll go first." She turned away, deciding that she needed to end this conversation, but she could barely take a few steps. Her legs were shaking from the unusual load. Mild noticed the lady's condition and, with concern, suggested that she go to the hospital, and Ellen had to agree. "I'll bring the carriage." The knight rushed to carry out the order. Ellen thought ruefully that she really did seem to be overworking herself. A minute later, Mild returned agitated. The carriage had disappeared. Then the Countess asked how far the hospital was, and although it was not far, the knight was worried that it would be difficult for the lady to get there. And although Ellen assured that she could handle it, Mild volunteered to at least accompany the lady. To the woman's surprise, another man asked why she didn't say she was injured. Philip, to Ellen's great surprise, was also worried about her condition. He noted that if the problem was with the carriage, then he could help her with that. However, his voice wavered when he noticed how tightly his wife was holding onto the hand of the knight accompanying her. Something stirred in his soul. Feelings for his wife, whom he is about to divorce, are inappropriate. "Get on your horse. It's better to return to the estate for treatment." The man extended his hand to his wife. But Ellen did not agree with his opinion and wanted to get treatment in the hospital, so Philip offered to at least take her. Ellen remarked that it would be cramped for the two of them on the horse, but the Count retorted that she used to like that. Seeing that he did not understand her hints, Ellen directly told him that he was an attractive companion, but that she would refuse today. But all the Count heard was how she called him a companion, and he asked what that meant. "That is, my life partner. But since we are going to get divorced, isn't it better to keep our distance?" the woman said. These words of Ellen painfully pricked the Count with the realization that she was right. With difficulty admitting that she was right, Philip went to his horse to unharness it. He ordered the knight to take his horse, find a carriage, and take the Countess to Smith's hospital. "Yes, Count." Mild accepted the order of his mistress's husband with respect. "It's time for us to go too," Philip noted and extended his hand to the woman. Ellen, without a second thought, extended hers to him, accepting her husband's help, and the next moment the Count picked up the woman in his arms, thereby giving her tired legs a rest. Ellen's face was dangerously close to Philip's, so close that for a second it took her breath away. Blushing, she asked what he was doing, and Philip replied that it didn't matter who he was, her husband or a stranger, it would be much faster. Ellen casually mentioned that it was complete cringe, and when the Count asked what it meant, she asked him not to talk to her anymore, so she would get better faster. The hospital building was indeed nearby, and soon the Countess was brought in for assistance. The doctor examined Ellen carefully and bandaged her wounds. The arm and leg were injured, but the doctor reassured him that it was just a mild inflammation that would soon pass. Besides, she should feel much better now, and the Countess thanked him for his help. Soon, Mild entered the room with the message that he had found a carriage and they could set out. Leaving the hospital, they stopped near the carriage, and a crazy thought crept into Philip's head that he could not ignore. His strong hand gently slid onto the waist of the woman standing next to him. The next moment, he picked the woman up again, much to her surprise. And then he let her go again, once again surprising the woman with his actions. "What's going on?" Ellen asked, dumbfounded, and Philip only replied with a smile that she looked worried. However, he himself could not explain his actions. He did not love Ellen, and wasn't it he who wanted to divorce her as soon as possible? Ellen also noticed that before he had clearly shown his displeasure, but now he suddenly smiled. In any case, she thought that as soon as he brought her to the carriage, he would return to his business. But for some reason, Philip also got into the carriage. To the boutique, Count Morris sat down and gave the order to go to the address. Mild, who was temporarily acting as a driver, turned around in surprise. The Count was unhappy that he would have to repeat himself twice, and the look in his violet eyes spoke volumes about it. The knight understood everything instantly and immediately replied that they were already on their way. Soon, the Earl and Countess Morris arrived at the famous boutique. Inside the building, the boutique owner met them and thanked the gentlemen for their visit. "Please come this way." The guest room was already waiting for them. Ellen and Philip sat down in the offered seats, and the woman began leafing through the offered product catalog with interest, and the Count asked the hostess to bring what she could recommend to them. They say that VIP clients shop differently in boutiques, and it seems that here too they bring things so that they can look at them, Ellen thought, sipping her tea. Soon, cautious footsteps were heard in the silence of the guest room. The boutique owner, smiling sweetly, carried a tray with various jars in her hands. These were jars and bottles filled with aromatic perfumes and other essences. Having placed the tray in front of the customers, she explained that they had recently received an aphrodisiac whose basic aroma was rose hips. A beautiful pink bottle with a pink liquid appeared in the woman's hands, which literally emitted a magical glow. Ellen took the bottle with interest and brought it to her face to get a better look. As soon as she removed the cap from the bottle, a strong aroma hit her nose. "A very pleasant aroma," the Countess remarked with delight. However, her seemingly simple words caused too violent a reaction from both the hostess and Philip. And when the Count asked again whether she had really called the aroma pleasant, Ellen suggested that he judge it for himself. She didn't understand why he had such a strange reaction. Maybe he didn't like the scent that much. But Count Morris explained that it was not the scent that was the issue, but the fact that it was the first time he had seen the Countess smile so sincerely, and the first time he had not heard any complaints from her. Then the woman remembered that she was a villain and had to behave accordingly. "Oh, come on, this perfume seems to cloud your mind," she added a little displeasure. The hostess said with a smile that there is a legend that the one who first inhales the aroma when the lid is opened will fall in love with the nearest person of the opposite sex for 1,000 years. Having barely understood the meaning of what was said, Ellen instinctively threw the perfume away from herself. The beautiful bottle fell to the floor and rolled under the table. This reaction incredibly surprised those present, and Ellen was horrified, which meant it was a magical perfume. If this is true, then it's a disaster, because the closest person of the opposite sex is Philip. But after divorcing Ellen, he marries a woman named Delina, and all she can do is suffer from unrequited love. "Are you crazy? Such important things need to be explained before opening the lid?" The Countess was indignant. The extremely frightened owner of the boutique asked the Countess to calm down, because the magical perfume is just the name of the perfume from the novel of the same name, where it is described as the most fragrant. And when Ellen incredulously asked about the novel, she explained that Mr. Renaud had ordered this novel from the writer to promote perfume sales. Could this really be some kind of product placement, the woman thought? Oh, and she thought that it really was a magical perfume and got scared. Philip tried hard to pretend that nothing had happened, but Ellen knew that she had behaved rather stupidly. In any case, the Count asked to pack everything and show the following goods. And next, the hostess showed a magic patch. It is truly enchanted, so it is expensive, but it quickly relieves pain, and therefore is popular among wealthy people. Ellen was impressed by the effectiveness of the patch, and asked why Philip had not used it before, to which the Count explained that it was used when the pain became unbearable. Essentially, it was a luxury item. But Ellen knows no less about this patch than he does. The Count was surprised. At this point, Ellen realized that the name Renoir had been mentioned, that it was her father or brother, and she decided to play dumb to better understand the situation. "Renoir, they are my relatives." Ellen asked cautiously, to Philippe's surprise. She then casually put the patch aside and asked to see the next items. 2 elegant ladies' umbrellas and a fan appeared before the customers. Ellen looked at the umbrellas with interest, unable to choose. They were both beautiful. Then Count Morris ordered both to be packed, to the delight of the boutique owner and the surprise of Ellen, who had only intended to buy one of them. Then the Countess took the fan in her hands and opened it. It was also very beautiful and graceful. "The main material is ivory. Its quality is the same as those given to the king," the hostess noted. Ellen was surprised that there were so many elephants that fans were made from their bones. But it turned out that the opposite is true, and these animals are on the verge of extinction. Philip did not miss his wife's interest in the fan, but Ellen immediately said that although it was beautiful, she would not use such things. What kind of things? Philip did not understand what she said. They must have killed an elephant for this, the Countess added regretfully, and the Count was taken aback. It seemed to him that she loved ivory products. At this point, Ellen was taken aback. How could one love something for which endangered animals are killed? Besides, ivory suits you well, Philip wondered. Ellen explained that she didn't know how it was before, but now she didn't like it. Killing elephants for their bones was terrible. Such words again discouraged the Count. Ellen continued to say that it would be a good idea to pass a law to protect elephants and prevent them from being cruelly hunted. As Ellen continued to speak, Philip became more and more gloomy. Did she really think that way? "Everything the Countess buys today, put it on Count Morris's account," Philip said to the hostess, getting up from the sofa. The Count deigned to leave, and Ellen noticed how much his mood changed after her words. Why did he leave so suddenly? The Countess felt somehow uneasy. And then she asked what was wrong with Mild, who was always nearby. No. Mild probably doesn't know either. But the knight said that the ivory trade is one of the master's main businesses, and just the other day he was hunting elephants. Ellen was horrified. It turns out she was openly criticizing Philip. What should she do now? Should she apologize and say she didn't know? Okay, it doesn't matter. They're getting divorced anyway, the woman decided. While Ellen was lost in thought, Mild watched the lady closely and decided to ask her something. Was this a planned divorce? The loyal knight asked Countess Ellen Morris. And then a silence hung in the room. Neither the Countess nor her knight dared to continue the conversation. Meanwhile, Earl Philip Morris returned to his estate. He walked silently into his office, where a variety of weapons hung on the wall, but the Count himself only walked restlessly from side to side around the room. Ellen was genuinely outraged by the killing of elephants for their ivory, and even wanted to pass a law to protect them. But before, she had claimed that the ivory business was good, and that it would be better to get rid of these wild creatures as soon as possible. And besides, she said that it was easier to breed them and starve them than to hunt them. But as soon as Ellen signed the divorce papers, she immediately began to speak differently. Could it be that she was really only pretending to love him? An unexpected thought occurred to the Count. No, that's impossible. She was literally obsessed with him for 10 years. Be that as it may, judging by her behavior, she was just waiting for a divorce. But what strange thoughts it seemed to him that he had already lost all feelings for her. He remembered how she had pressed herself against him, albeit accidentally. At that moment, his heart almost stopped. But what is he even thinking? Obviously, she is trying to deceive him. Philip took out from his bosom that ill-fated letter, because of which a lot had happened today. And no matter how much he looked at it, the memories of the beautiful Ellen did not leave his head. Only now did Count Morris realize what a wonderful person she was. Without realizing it, he had always admired her. Maybe he should pretend he didn't know anything and call off the divorce, the man thought. No, it won't work that way. It will never work that way. There is no need to think about it anymore. Now is an important time for the prosperity of their family. I am too old to suppress the rebels, and my son is not yet mature enough for this. Besides, I am very tired and want to spend my last years in peace. Such was the content of the letter from the king himself. Earl Morris accepted the king's offer with favor. When the former queen died, Earl Morris adopted her 10-year-old son and raised him as his own. But the king's condition, judging by the letter, is deteriorating. Now it is time to seriously prepare for the inheritance. The red letter flew straight into the burning fireplace, and the flames swallowed it without a trace. There was very little time left, and Count Philip Morris was determined. The Count devoted the next few hours to letters and work. And then I decided it was time to tell the children about everything. And here stood Marlborough and Layla, waiting for news from Earl Morris. "You called me, father?" Marlborough began first, and the Count said without ceremony that it seemed the time had come to begin preparations. This news stunned the young people, and they could not hide their emotions. Princess Rayla of the small kingdom of Perdes was a victim of usurpation in her political marriage. She was very sad and withdrawn, but over time she opened up to Marlborough and truly fell in love with him, but now she faces a choice again. And Marlborough was worried that Layla might be in danger in the new situation. In fact, Marlborough would have preferred to inherit the title of Earl rather than take the dangerous throne to live happily with Lila. But now it was too late to talk about it, and Earl Morris could only assign guards to her. He was also interested in how the Countess felt about her, and the girl replied that she had not heard anything from her lately. This answer greatly surprised Philip. It was not at all in his wife's character. Marlborough also confirmed that he had not seen her once since they returned from their honeymoon, although he usually hurries to the children no matter what happens. Philip recalled how Ellen had told them at their first meeting, "Welcome to hell," and it couldn't be that she had changed her tactics later. The young man also found it strange, but apparently his father had already decided everything about their future, how much he suffered if he could not openly express his feelings. "But she never really came," Layla added quietly. Count Morris finally realized that Ellen really had not shown any aggression towards the children and was again greatly surprised. But maybe she at least passed something through the servants. But Layla assured that nothing like that happened, and thanks to this, she was able to rest peacefully after the journey. And the girl added with delight that perhaps she was trying to toughen her up because she was too weak before the wedding. The Count listened in amazement as his daughter-in-law admired how it was possible to temper so harshly. In any case, she was glad that everything turned out this way. But suddenly, Ellen is unhappy with the divorce and is preparing revenge or something else. "What is the matter?" the man wondered. Marlborough asked carefully whether the Count intended to cancel the divorce during the grace period granted by the Emperor. Philip literally jumped up from this question. It seemed like something had changed. If even the children thought so, her kick was really impressive. But if she really changed, then it was worth thinking about. And no matter how much he thought about it, he still decided that he couldn't trust her. She had been with him for 10 years, and he knew her character. And there was something different here. She had a goal. "No, this has never happened before. She has never behaved like this, and that makes it even more tense." Ellen was still in Mrs. Heads's boutique at the time, surprised to be offered candles, even though the original candles would only become popular 3 years later. She asked why the owner worked so much with candles and where they came from, to which the woman replied that they were produced in different places, and candles from Renoir sold especially well. The Countess was surprised to hear a familiar name again. Could these really be the best candles from Renoir? "It is more likely that everyone is buying them because of the royal palace's supplies," Miss Hedes added. An interesting thought came to the Countess's mind, and she asked what would happen if she brought a special candle, and whether Mrs. Hedes could sell it too. But when the boutique owner asked what kind of candle it was, Ellen replied with a sly smile that it was a trade secret. However, Mrs. Hedes wanted to see the product to say for sure, but if it really was a special candle, then of course she would sell it. Considering the conversation over, Countess Morris asked for all the candles she had chosen to be packed. In fact, candles require little investment, so it is a great business and an opportunity for her to improve her financial situation. Leaving the boutique, Marlborough asked why the lady had bought so many candles, and in response received that he would soon find out everything. Are they really going to build a temple or something like that? A surprising picture appeared before the knight's mind's eye. Within an hour, all the purchased candles were delivered to the Count's estate. Almost all the servants were involved in delivering the Countess's purchases to her chambers. And after some time, all the candles were placed in the mistress's room, and the maids humbly awaited further instructions. Ellen looked at all her purchases with delight and thought about something of her own. However, her calm was interrupted by a loud sound. It was Philip who burst into her room. "What candles!" the man shouted from the doorway, looking with horror at the huge boxes and the countless number of purchases. "I decided to try myself in business," Ellen calmly answered her husband. However, the man asked with displeasure how candles could be a business. But the woman was not going to tell him everything. Then he became indignant at how she was going to run a business if she had no experience at all, to which Ellen mysteriously replied that she had a plan and that he should not judge by herself. However, the Count was really worried about his wife, because everyone says that they have a plan, and then they fail in the end. The money for the business will still be taken from this house. Don't worry, I can manage with my own resources, Ellen answered even more mysteriously, because the scented candle business is just the beginning. She asked Philip to stop asking questions and instead have some tea with her. After the divorce papers were drawn up, you changed a lot. And your attitude towards money, too, the Count noted. Besides, she had never poured him tea before. The Countess was afraid that she had done something wrong again. Maybe she should have asked the maid to pour some tea. And she asked how they usually drank tea, surprising her husband with her question, because before she always poured him tea in a special way. Philip was stunned when his wife asked him to show him how she did it before. "It's not difficult to pour tea, could you try?" the woman asked again. The Count felt awkward, but he could not refuse such a simple request. Blushing, he assumed a pose, slightly turning his waist and almost half lying on the sofa, to the great surprise of the Countess, who was watching this. "And then, after pouring the tea, you touched your lips with your fingertips and looked at me," the Count continued, blushing more and more. Ellen was extremely indignant she could not behave so openly, even in the presence of strangers. "It was your joy and happiness," Philip retorted. But the Countess stubbornly refused to believe this, claiming that she did not remember such behavior. In the end, she asked Earl Morris to forget the past Ellen, so that this would not happen again. At that moment, the butler passed by, and Ellen called the servant by name. She asked how Domingos was feeling, and tears appeared in the butler's eyes. He was touched by the fact that the lady was interested in his well-being. "Thank you, madam. Thanks to you, I'm fine." The servant became completely emotional. Ellen added that if you are sick, you need to rest more, but Domingos assured the lady that he is capable of doing his job. Then the Countess wanted to know about the financial situation of the family and asked the servant to bring books and explain everything in detail, and was frightened when the butler suddenly shuddered. She added that if he was busy or not feeling well, he might not do it. And the servant immediately said that he was simply touched, that this was the first time Madame had asked him for something. Exactly, she was a villain, and a villain wouldn't ask, but order. "I'll bring it right now and explain it in detail," Domingos bowed politely. After some time, a stack of housebooks appeared on the table. As Ellen studied them, she was amazed that the family had so much money, but the building she wanted cost next to nothing. But Ellen's expenses exceed all conceivable and inconceivable imagination. How could she spend money like that? She spent everything she earned. And she was even in debt due to ill-considered investments, and gambling it would take another 10 years to pay it all off. In today's money, that would be about $800 billion. She's definitely gone crazy. The house Philip bought with his last money was on Ellen's list of assets. He is a saint. How could he only now decide to divorce such a woman? The Countess asked the servant where all her purchases were, and was told that they were in the vault on the 4th floor. "Great, then we need to see." Ellen asked the butler to take him. When they reached the 4th floor, the servant inserted the key into the keyhole and turned it. The doors opened before Countess Morris, and an astonishing sight appeared before her. Wow! The woman couldn't help but let out a sigh of admiration. The room was huge and completely filled with all sorts of different things. Separately on the table stood boxes with precious jewelry, obviously very expensive. "Without any business, you can become a billionaire just by selling everything in this room." Just in case, she asked whether she could take all of this after the divorce, and the servant replied that of course it was her property. Ellen once again carefully examined the room and the objects in it. "Philip didn't say anything when I bought all this?" asked the Countess. Domingos replied that as the Countess knew, the owner allowed her to spend as much as she wanted without restrictions. "And most likely, the owner doesn't even know what exactly she bought," the servant added to the woman's horror. Ellen asked where the Count was now and asked Domingos to close the room. She needed to meet with Philip. When the massive door closed, the woman thought with relief that it was all hers. And yet she has many thoughts and things to do. Everything needs to be checked and calculated properly in order to ensure your future. Soon, guided by her thoughts, Countess Morris arrived in the Count's office. Philip sat in a chair at the table and didn't even turn around when she entered the room. And only when she called him by name, He only slightly turned his head in her direction. Ellen explained that she had come to ask him a couple of questions, but the man still did not turn to face her. "Philip, look at me." The woman got angry at her husband's behavior. The Count asked what had suddenly happened, still not intending to look at his wife. And when the Countess asked whether she had disturbed his rest, he answered in the negative and suggested asking the questions she had come with. Ellen wondered why he didn't turn around, since it was better to turn around and talk. "Well, I'm just wearing comfortable clothes," the Count answered quietly. And then it dawned on the Countess that the man was sitting naked, but why in this state in the office? In the end, she decided that there was nothing wrong with it, and insisted that they talk while looking at each other. The man tried to resist, but Ellen confidently grabbed the back of the chair and turned him around. As soon as Philip found himself face to face with her, the Countess's gaze was met with a wondrous sight. Count Morris wore a blue robe that was open quite revealingly at chest level, revealing a powerful chest and pumped-up abs. But this did not bother the woman, and she looked intently into the eyes of the sitting man. "How can you turn the chair around so suddenly?" Philip was confused and indignant at the same time. But Ellen's gaze was fixed only on the man's bare chest. Now she understood why Ellen yearned so much for her husband's attention. "This robe, I just tried it on once because it's a gift," Philip stammered embarrassedly. But Ellen noticed that she hadn't said anything, except that the robe suited him. Children know how to choose gifts. She slowly approached his face, promising that she would not tell anyone about the robe. But in return, she asked for something and moved closer to his ear. "Kiss," she said in a gentle whisper, moving very close to the man. Philip blushed deeply at his wife's words and seemed to lose the power of speech. He asked with great difficulty how to kiss, but Ellen reasonably noted that they were still married. "All you do is pester me at every opportunity," the Count remarked with a smile. Ellen immediately moved away from the chair, noting that if she didn't want to, she wouldn't insist. But Philip suddenly, to Ellen's great surprise, agreed, but only once. Fully prepared for the kiss, the man closed his eyes, lightly covered his bare chest with his hands, and began to wait for the kiss. "Open your lips," she whispered, approaching the man again. The Count obeyed the woman without question and slightly opened his lips in anticipation. Ellen moved closer to Philip's face and lightly touched the man's forehead with her lips. The man, not expecting such a turn of events, opened his eyes in shock, and the Countess laughed merrily, because the Count looked too sweet and innocent. "You were joking with me," the Count realized, and Ellen confirmed that she had indeed decided to joke, and he was so embarrassed. And she added that since the robe had been given to him, he could wear it without embarrassment. But finally Philip remembered why she had come and asked, to which the woman replied that she was finding out about their finances. "Just don't tell me that you don't have enough money," the Count asked dejectedly. Leaning towards him again, Ellen assured him that it was not like that, and that it was strange that they had not yet divorced. The last words stunned the man beyond belief, and his eyes opened wide. Meanwhile, the woman thanked him for allowing her to spend as much as she wanted. But why did he let things go so far? But it was the only thing he could do for her to help her cope with the stress of adoption. After these words, an oppressive silence settled in the room. Everyone was thinking about their own things. "You did your best," Ellen said with a strange tone of gratitude. The woman took a step back from the Count, which surprised him again. She added that he had suffered a lot because of her, and she would try to at least solve their financial problems a little before leaving. With these words, Countess Morris slowly left the room, leaving the Count in bewilderment. Although she always looked beautiful, she had an unbearable love of preening. Thinking about everything, the Count closed his eyes, but a loud sound made him surprised. Ellen entered the room again, and Philip rose from his chair in surprise. "It's not fair to wear a robe alone," the woman said coquettishly, wearing a blue robe with a cutout on the chest. After all, they were given to be worn together. She slowly approached him. And she even took his hands, asking him to come closer to her. "Darling," Philip began to stutter in surprise, but readily fulfilled her request. And Ellen carefully led her husband to the sofa and sat down on it herself. Forcing the Count to lie on top of her, he had broken the rules, so he had to kiss her as punishment. Being sexual without warning is also a violation. As she said this, her breasts and the neckline of her robe swayed sensually. It was so revealing that the man couldn't help but lean in, bringing his lips closer to hers. A man and a woman merged in a passionate and sensual kiss. Their kiss lasted long and excited both of them more and more. Considering that it was necessary to continue, Philip grabbed the Countess by the waist, forcing her to take another, more revealing pose. Watching the woman's reaction to his actions, he looked intently into her eyes, waiting for an answer. Philip pursed his lips in anticipation of the continuation of the kisses and the transition to other actions. But contrary to his expectations, the woman punched him in the face with all her might, so hard that he fell to the floor. "Ellen!" the Count said, stunned, finding himself on the floor. The man rose to his feet and found himself next to the chair he had recently been sitting on. Looking around and realizing that he was alone in the room, the Count realized that he had simply fallen out of his chair when he fell asleep, and everything that had just happened between him and Ellen was just a dream. But he really liked it. Ellen, meanwhile, had changed her clothes and was sprawled out on her bed. But her thoughts did not give her peace. She did not understand what she should do now. Maybe she went too far. Why did she kiss her almost ex-husband on the forehead? Lying on the bed, she wondered if maybe they still had a chance to make things work. But there has to be a villain in this story. Otherwise, it will be too boring. The villain creates tension, and the protagonist gets her just reward. But anyway, she is Ellen now and can't continue to play the villain knowing that it will lead to her death. She decided to sell everything to get funds for her business, leave a little for Philippa, and leave this house, and also take care of the children. "Okay, I'll start tomorrow." Ellen sat up in bed, full of determination. She can do anything and will realize all her grandiose plans. At that moment, there was a knock on the door and Philip's voice calling her. Ellen wondered what he wanted, but allowed him to enter. When Ellen opened the door for him, the man was standing on the threshold with a box in his hands, tied with a yellow ribbon. Having seated him at the table, she asked what had happened. Having put the box on the table, the Count moved it towards the Countess. He brought a gift for her. Ellen wondered what it was and why he was giving her gifts. "I won't wear it anymore," Philip replied. And Ellen immediately understood what he was talking about and what was in that box. The man continued to say that it suited her better and that 3 sets would be enough for every day. The Countess had many thoughts in her head. Was he really so embarrassed that he didn't want to wear it at all? Or was he afraid that she would ask to cancel the divorce if they wore the same robes? But she couldn't understand why he should give it to her. "Thank you for your concern, but I already have too many robes," the woman answered sincerely. And she asked him not to worry. She would not ask for the divorce to be canceled because of the pair of robes. If he did not like wearing them together, then she would not wear hers either. But seeing Philip's reaction to her words, she clarified that he didn't want to wear a robe because he was afraid that she would change her mind about the divorce. And, to the Count's great surprise, she added that she would also start a new life. She made the final decision and sent the documents to the court. As if radiating an angelic glow, Ellen said she wanted him not to worry that she would change her mind. But Count Morris looked at the Countess in a very strange way, so much so that she did not understand the reason for his look. He tiredly covered his eyes with his hands, saying that this was a misunderstanding and that this was not why he came. Blushing, he added that he thought this gift was more suitable for her and therefore wanted her to wear it. What was he saying Ellen didn't understand, even though she saw how embarrassed the man was. Philip jumped to his feet and quickly said goodbye to her, unable to bear it any longer. Without saying another word, the Count left the Countess's private chambers. "I thought he was being kind, or was I mistaken?" Ellen thought, puzzled, because according to the plot, Philip shouldn't behave like that. The next day, the Countess, being in her room, called her faithful knight. But instead of Mild, to the Countess's surprise, the butler Domingos appeared in the chambers. "I called Sir Mild. Why did you come?" she asked the servant sternly. And she was unpleasantly surprised when the butler replied that her knight was now with Count Morris. Domingos replied that the owner had called him, but this did not clarify anything for the Countess. Why is this so? Philip rarely invites Sir Mild to his place, and what business could they possibly have? The butler added thoughtfully that today the Count had called him as soon as he entered his office, and then Ellen began to worry. The servant offered his help instead of the knight, but the Countess assured him that this was not the case. And she asked to call a merchant who had a lot of money. To the butler's great surprise, the Countess announced that she was going to sell all her works of art. Domingo said the most active buyer here is a dealer who is currently on their land, but he is known for undercutting the price, so he believes it is better to bring in a professional appraiser, even if it takes time. Okay, then call them both, Countess Morris decided. And it is also necessary to organize a party in honor of Layla, a large banquet to which all free aristocrats are invited. Prepare everything down to the smallest detail. Ellen looked quite inspired as she said this. That same day, the merchant arrived and immediately promised to offer the best price, not forgetting to thank for the invitation. Ellen's gaze fell on the man's thick fingers. Hung with massive rings, he looked terribly greedy. She headed to the 4th floor, ordering the merchant to follow her to show him the things. Soon they were standing in the middle of the chambers examining the Countess's collection, and the seller began to appraise it. "This crystal figurine is a bit old. I offer 2 gold ones," the shrewd merchant began. Mild whispered to the lady that 5 years ago it was worth 10 gold pieces. The merchant moved on to the next statuette, calling it good, and offered 5 gold pieces for it, which greatly surprised Ellen, because, as the knight had said, this statuette cost 4, and it was sold by the same merchant. She realized that he was trying to earn her trust, and then lowering the price of everything else to deceive her. In a whisper, Ellen asked Mild to find out if there were any other items he had sold. "By the way, Philip called you this morning," the Countess asked her faithful knight, and she was interested in why. Trying not to look his lady in the eye, Mild explained that the Count was asking about the divorce papers and whether he had really sent them marked final. "I told the truth. The documents were sent with a seal," Mild added. Ellen realized that Philip did not trust her or her words. After some time, the evaluation of all the objects in this room was completed, and it was possible to move on to the next one. At that moment, the butler entered the room and apologized for the delay. Mild offered to show everything to the merchant together with Domingo's, and the lady could rest. The Countess looked at the servants standing nearby in bewilderment, and they shuddered in surprise. And Ellen agreed, ordering that they be called when they were finished. After all, workers always got nervous around their bosses. The servants immediately breathed a sigh of relief. They really felt the tension. As she left the room, the woman thought that she too had worked and knew what it was like. Meanwhile, the Countess decided to take a walk in the garden because it was sunny there and the flowers were fragrant. After some time, she stared in surprise somewhere ahead along the road. There, on a high garden ladder, a young man was working, trimming a tree. Ellen hid behind a nearby tree and watched him silently. Soon the young man took a couple of steps and descended from the stairs to the ground. And although the work was not easy and beads of sweat were running down his face, he looked very pleased. Then he took the wooden ladder in his strong hands, and he moved it a little to the side, intending to continue working. Having marked out the work front, the young man raised the garden shears into the air. At this time, the Countess decided to come closer, interested in his work. The young man noticed out of the corner of his eye that he was not alone in the garden and became very scared, so much so that he literally fell off the stairs onto the ground, landing on his butt. The Countess thought she was like a monster to the gardener, which was not surprising since Ellen was considered a villain. And looking at the servant sitting on the ground, she decided that she would have to play her role to the end. "Stand up," the Countess ordered sternly, looking down at the gardener. Without raising his eyes, the young man obediently rose from the ground. And then he timidly looked the Countess in the eyes, looking extremely frightened. "At ease," Ellen barked, and the gardener immediately jerked upright. "At ease, at 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 ease." The Countess seemed to be mocking the poor servant who could not help but carry out his mistress's orders. But when Ellen ordered him to do 20 push-ups, he still timidly asked if that was all. The woman asked in surprise if he really wanted anything else, and received the answer that he just wanted to avoid being whipped. "What did I beat with a whip?" Ellen mentally horrified at her own actions. And she asked him if he wanted a lash, to which the gardener confidently stated no. The young man began doing push-ups, counting out loud the number of push-ups. Ellen, watching him, could not help but notice the muscles showing through his shirt and the generally sexy movements. "What am I doing?" This was the question that Count Philip Morris asked himself, watching his wife and the gardener from the window. Why is she doing this? Was it an act or something else? Deciding that he needed to figure things out, he headed for the exit. 19, 20, the tired gardener sprawled on the ground in front of Countess Morris. But he didn't lie there for long and hurried to his feet, trying to even out his ragged breathing. "Who told you to stop?" Ellen snapped, and the young man sank to the ground again, worrying about what would happen next. The Countess was only thinking about how she wanted to look at his muscles. But this was too much. "Do you know why I do this?" she asked the man, and he replied that it was his fault. When the slightly surprised woman asked why exactly, the gardener said that he had not shown up for the date she had arranged. Ellen was stunned when she heard about the date. What does that mean? Trying to hide her surprise, she ordered him to tell her more. And the gardener told her that several months ago he had not come to the garden at midnight as she had ordered. "Do you know why I gave such an order?" asked the Countess, and heard that it was so that the owner would become jealous. It's crazy. Is this really true? How many more invisible traps are left on her path? Ellen decided that when she returns to her world, she will lock the author and force him to rewrite everything, feeding him only fried dumplings. Clearing her throat, she carefully told the servant, who was still lying on the ground, that that was not the issue. Then she ordered him to stand up, which he did without delay. The Countess explained that she had simply lost her temper because he had greeted her incorrectly, and henceforth he should greet her properly and not avoid her if he meets her by chance. The young man accepted the order with respect and bowed to the Countess, and she ordered him to continue working. As she left, she thought that despite his courageous appearance, this young man was too naive, but his muscles were truly impressive. The memory made her smile. Something funny happened. Philip's voice sounded, and Ellen turned around in surprise. She replied that it was nothing special, but the Count added that she was joking with the gardener. "I saw you through the window. It looked like you were playing with a puppy." An incomprehensible expression froze on the Count's face. Ellen noticed this. Did she accidentally achieve what the old Ellen had planned? The Countess explained that she had actually punished him for not saying hello. Before, the gardener would just run away without saying hello, so she punished him. Did she really do something wrong? Philip's face brightened, and he said that since Hade had been impolite, he would lock him up in jail for 3 days, which literally took Ellen by surprise. In a good mood, the Count prepared to leave, intending to do so immediately, but the woman grabbed him by the sleeve of his shirt, asking him to wait, because it was not necessary. "Impoliteness towards the Countess deserves punishment," Philip insisted. "Or maybe it would be better to fire him," he suggested, and the Countess was surprised why he was reacting like that. Was he still angry? Taking her husband by the hands, she assured him that everything was fine, and the servant promised to behave politely in the future, so she asked him to leave him alone. "Then let's take a walk together," the Count suddenly suggested hopefully. And to soften the situation, Ellen agreed. To be honest, she was not at all against the walk. Philip, like a true gentleman, offered the lady his hand, but she pretended not to notice. It was too awkward and she couldn't do it. It was a bright, sunny day. The surface of the lake sparkled in the sun's rays, and everything around was fragrant. Ellen Morris walked in the garden, Philip silently following his wife. The sky was bright blue. The wind was blowing pleasantly, and somewhere the trill of an invisible bird could be heard. Philip and Ellen looked up to the sky, wondering where the bird was that was making these amazing sounds. And a little blue bird sat high in the tree and sang joyfully. And it was this bird that the Countess noticed. Philip also saw this lovely creature. It turned out to be a bluebird. At the same time, another sound was heard, this time sharp and a little frightening. "Who is it?" Ellen was a little frightened, and the Count replied that there was no one. "And this frightening sound is made by a woodpecker who is building a house nearby." But no matter how much Ellen looked, she could not see this woodpecker, and then the Count stretched out his hands to her, asking permission. And the next moment he lifted the woman by the waist and sat her on his shoulder. "See?" he asked, holding the light and fragile Ellen with both hands. And indeed, looking closely, Ellen saw a small bird in the crown of the tree, vigorously pecking at the bark. And although she saw what she wanted, she was worried that it was hard for Philip to hold her. "Everything is fine. Look as much as you like." Philip was very happy, and it was reflected on his face. Ellen even blushed. He looked so handsome when he looked at her. Such a face was simply illegal. And yet Ellen asked to lower her, because she had watched while the Count was doing this, and he said that last time he was surprised how she, so fragile and graceful, was able to lift him into the air. Ellen was even embarrassed by such a compliment, not knowing what to say. She was so shocked then that she doesn't even remember how it happened. Philip continued to admire that although it was unexpected, it was very impressive. The Countess even suggested that he was a pervert since he liked it so much. "That doesn't mean I want to be beaten again," Count Morris retorted. Considering the situation exhausted, Ellen suggested changing the subject and moving on. However, the Count noticed a pear on a nearby tree and invited the woman to taste it. Ellen looked in the direction he was pointing and said that the pear was high up and she wouldn't be able to reach it. Without a word, the man bent down to the ground and picked up a stone lying nearby. With one precise, powerful movement, he launched it into the hanging punching bag. The knocked-down fruit immediately fell to the ground and rolled right at the feet of the people under the tree. This whole action made a huge impression on the Countess, and the man added that there was nothing special about it. He had been doing this all the time since childhood. Then the Count slowly approached the fallen fruit and carefully picked it up from the ground. But he didn't give it back right away, but went to the water to wash the pear. When everything was finished, he invited Ellen to sit down on the flat stones nearby. Ellen accepted his invitation and sat down carefully on one of the stones. From somewhere in his bosom, Philip took out a small knife and, sitting down next to the woman, began to peel the pear. After cutting off a small piece, he added that it should be delicious and suggested that his wife try it. "The juice is dripping onto your hands. Eat carefully." He brought a piece of pear right to Ellen's mouth. The woman chewed the offered piece with gusto and looked with delight at the man sitting next to her. The pear was very tasty, but the atmosphere changed somehow strangely. Could this really be what she thinks? A man and a woman were sitting next to each other on a flat rock on a bright sunny day and talking. When the fruit was finished, they moved on, and Philip asked her how she liked the pear. Ellen replied that she liked it, but asked where they were going next. Count Morris suggested that we look at a dog kennel located nearby, and soon they came to a small fenced area, which was the dog kennel. There were several cages with dogs sitting in them, and other dogs were walking around. One of the servants immediately approached the Count and greeted him. Philip immediately asked how Blank was feeling. The servant replied that his wound had healed, but he limped slightly on his front paw. His condition is such that he can live, but is no longer fit for hunting. "This dog is big and eats a lot. It might be worth putting him down." Ellen felt like she was being electrocuted when she heard about the euthanasia. However, Philip was not at all worried about this. He believed that they had no choice. "Wait!" she cried out in fear. There was no way she could allow this to happen. The Countess could not understand what they were talking about. The dog had been injured while hunting, and the servant confirmed that Blank had been hit by an elephant. "You used him for dangerous hunting, and now you want to kill him because he has become useless." The Countess was indignant. Frightened by the mistress's tone, the servant babbled that he was simply following his mistress's instructions. And Ellen became despondent again. How many pitfalls of this kind there are here? The servant repeated the order she had given earlier, Blank and Gwen, as well as other dogs with the names of her relatives. If they were harmed, they should be destroyed. The Count gently placed his hand on the woman's shoulder, asking if everything was okay with her, that she had been having problems with her memory lately, and she replied that she really didn't know what was wrong with her. In her mind, she cursed the old Ellen in every possible way. How she could name dogs after her relatives and order them to be killed. "Don't kill Blanc, take care of him," she finally ordered the servant. The dog, as if realizing that they were talking about him, stood at attention and began wagging his tail vigorously. "You're saved, baby. I thought I'd have to secretly send you to the village," he said affectionately to the animal. Ellen also wanted to pet the dog, but first asked if he would bite her. The Count took his wife by the hand and assured her that he would not bite her because it was her dog. As soon as the woman's hand touched Blanc's head, she delightedly noted that he was so sweet and soft and generally a good boy. Philip watched his wife with surprise. Could it really be Ellen? She never behaved like that. Having had enough time to chat with her pet, the Countess announced that it was time for them to go. A man and a woman walked through the garden together, but each was thinking about something of their own. The Countess had no idea what else she had done earlier, and wondered whether Philip would cope on his own if she did not interfere, as well as Marlborough and Lila, whether they would be okay if she did not touch them. At this time, Philip said that he had a proposal for her. The art she was doing impressed him greatly, and the Count would like Layla and the knights to learn this too. So could Ellen help with this? The woman thought that the opportunity to teach Layla taekwondo would allow her to become closer to her. Through training, she would be able to gain her daughter-in-law's trust, but she was still worried whether the girl would want to learn from her. The Count asked her not to worry about it because if he asked, she would agree. However, he offered to teach not for free, but for 10 gold for 10 lessons of 2 hours. Or he could offer her a house from the list for a year, which greatly surprised Ellen. And just agreeing wasn't her style, so she asked to come up with something else. Instead, she offered to teach Layla every 2 hours every day. Upon hearing that only Layla would be trained, the Count sheepishly asked if he would be able to see it, and Ellen agreed to make an exception for him. "Okay, then I will give you all the houses on the list," the man beamed, which greatly surprised the Countess. When they returned to the house, they were met by a servant who informed them that Sir Sean Lee had arrived and was waiting for his master in the drawing room. Turning to his wife, the Count invited her to go first, and Ellen did so. As she left, she thought about how Philip was being especially kind today, and whether it was because she asked him not to kill the wounded dog, or because she agreed to teach taekwondo. The Countess had her own affairs to attend to. She studied the purchase amounts and the current valuation, and concluded that they were in order. Mild added that he had arranged everything and asked if the lady was satisfied with the work. There are 452 items in total, but you only need to take those that are marked on the sheets that she gives you. From the list, she only marked about 100 items that she intended to sell, to the worried surprise of the merchant. "Just 100 if you don't want it, forget about it," she said, looking at the man's displeased expression. The merchant asked how much it would cost, and the knight replied 230 gold pieces. Soon the Countess found herself in the hands of a bag containing the treasured gold coins. In the real world, it would be around 230 million won, and the woman's eyes lit up against her will. But what should she do? This is not enough to pay off Philip's debt, so there is only one way out: use it as startup capital for a business. We need to increase this money and pay off the debt. The next day, she ordered Sir Mild to find the candlemakers and report to her. To start, Ellen decided to make a few scented candles to try out, but she doesn't know if the simple recipes will work well enough. For several more days, work was in full swing at the Morris estate. The Countess made scented candles herself. She boiled wax in a large cauldron right in the fireplace, adding various aromatic additives. And even when the maids announced it was lunchtime, she asked for something simple to eat. All her thoughts were absorbed by the candles, but Ellen felt that something was missing. Time after time, Ellen carefully reread the recipes, trying to find what exactly was missing. "Madam, what are you doing?" Count Philip Morris entered the room without knocking, and he was surprised when the Countess said that it didn't matter and asked him not to disturb her and to leave. Clearly not wanting to talk further, she asked them to ignore her and go about their business. And when the man was still standing in the room, she turned him around and forcefully pushed him out of the room. Then Countess Morris pulled the bell, summoning the servants. They did not keep us waiting long and immediately appeared in the room, but to the woman's amazement, Philip was also looming behind the servant. Beginning to get irritated, Ellen asked if he had any business today, and the Count replied that he did, but that she was acting strangely and he was worried. Ellen ordered the servant to call the gardener, Hade, and bring some things from the kitchen, while passing on her notes. Philippe asked suspiciously why the gardener Hyde was needed, and the woman replied that there was a task for him. Let the Count not worry. She would not give him hard work. She also added that he could go about his business. She pointed her finger at the door. They didn't want to see him here, and the Count was forced to leave. A minute later, wild stomping was heard in the corridor. The door to the room swung open, and a breathless gardener appeared on the threshold, asking if Madame had called him. The Countess asked if Hade knew of any herbs that repelled insects or flowers with a calming scent. The servant knew this, and the Countess asked him to collect these plants for her. And she gave him only an hour to do this, which horrified the young man. "Yes, hurry up," Ellen urged him, and the gardener was forced to begin the task. "If you are late, you will be punished," she added, causing the servant to quicken his pace. Hade turned out to be a quick-witted young man and carried out his mistress's orders, running like a squirrel in a wheel. Soon the servant brought a barrel from the kitchen, and the maid the ingredients she had asked for. The Countess asked to put everything to one side and pour water into a bucket. Soon the water was ready and filled the barrel standing in the room. The Countess hoped that she would succeed in her plan because her future depended on it. Exactly an hour later, Hyde appeared with a basket of flowers and herbs in his hands, his face as red as— "Madam, I have brought the herbs and flowers you asked for," he said breathlessly, and Ellen asked him to wash them thoroughly in that bucket of water. The young man began to carry out his mistress's order without delay. Soon, pure herbs and flowers stood in a basket on the table, spreading their aroma throughout the room. And the Countess decided to reward the efficient worker and asked if he was hungry, offering him some cake. Haida didn't have to be asked twice, and he dug into the food with gusto. It's amazing how such a masculine body can devour sweet desserts with such appetite. And when Haida swallowed the piece of cake in one gulp, Ellen was surprised at what a good appetite he had. She also asked the young man not to tell anyone what they were doing there. After a small snack, the woman thought about how to use these herbs and flowers. And while she was thinking about this, she heard a surprised cry from a servant behind her. She realized that Philip was here again, and even heard their conversation through the half-open door. "You have nothing to do. Why are you walking around here again?" Count Morris scolded the gardener. Philip was indignant that the gardener had just left Ellen's workshop all in sweat, and the young man justified himself by saying that he was simply doing everything the Countess asked. Coming close to him, Philip asked what she had ordered, but remembering his mistress's recent request, Haida replied that he could not say. Philip thought that no one was listening to his conversation with the gardener, but his gaze caught on the half-open door of the room. There, through a small crack, his wife looked at him with an angry gaze. Pretending not to notice anything, the Count released the gardener, allowing him to go. Ellen was outraged that Philip had come to spy on everything she did. After several days of intense work, the Countess set out on her journey again. As she approached the carriage, she asked Mild where the candle-making workshop was, and was told that it was on the outskirts, so that they would not return until late at night. "But this is a deserted place. Robbers often appear there," the knight added anxiously, and he suggested inviting a candlemaster to the estate, but the woman replied that she had to see the workplace in person. "Perhaps we should take a guard with us," she suggested, and the knight added that he should speak as the lord. Turning around, Mild headed back into the house to talk to Earl Morris, and Ellen remained in the carriage, thinking that they might come across robbers. After some time, Mild returned, but not alone, but accompanied by horses and Count Morris himself. Philip immediately pointed out that the outskirts were unsafe due to bandits, and the Countess would need protection. And although Ellen tried to persuade him that he didn't need to go with her and that she would take the knights, Philly didn't agree with this. "You're busy, aren't you?" she noted, but the man said that he had specially cleared his schedule. "Do you really want to go for love of me?" she asked, which made him blush and hesitate. And since he didn't answer her questions, Ellen realized that all this could be true. But he couldn't love the villain Ellen. Then maybe he fell in love with the real her. "We haven't divorced yet, so if something happens to the Countess, I'll have problems," the Count stammered, blushing. And Ellen had to admit that this might be the case. Ellen still insisted that she would only take 2 guards with her, but the Count did not give in, saying that it could be dangerous. Considering the conversation over, the Countess told the Count to stay at home and rest, and since he had nothing to do, let him walk the dog. With the help of her bodyguards, Countess Ellen Morris boarded the carriage, hoping that everything would be fine since she was protected. Overwhelmed by conflicting thoughts, the Countess left on business in a carriage accompanied by guards. The Count watched this silently and then sighed wearily, but his gaze changed. He clearly decided something. The Countess told him to walk the dog and hoped that he would, but the man decided otherwise. The Countess's carriage rolled slowly along the streets, which were becoming less and less crowded. Ellen looked out the window carefully, noting everything that was happening around her. It seems that Philip said something to the 2 knights accompanying her. Of course, she asked them about it, but the knights only repeated that the master ordered them to take care of the lady. Do they really think that she will believe it? If bandits do appear, it will definitely be in a place like this on the outskirts of the village. Mild agreed with her conclusions, but hoped that everything would be fine and this would not happen. It was already getting dark outside, but the carriage was still moving forward. At some point, one of the wheels fell into a shallow hole, but this was enough for an accident to occur. "Be careful, madam, the wheel has fallen into a hole," Mild tried to warn the Countess with a loud cry. However, Ellen herself already felt how the carriage shook violently and fell on its side. "Stop! Give everything you have or die!" An angry shout was heard from outside. The guards accompanying the Countess stood up to protect the carriage, but they were surrounded by at least dozens of armed bandits. Ellen could not sit silently in the carriage and therefore intended to go outside. However, the knight shouted a warning for the lady to return back. "They don't look like bandits," Ellen said thoughtfully, looking around at the people surrounding them. "They look more like refugees than bandits." But Mild promised that they would sort it out and asked the lady not to interfere. "Wait a minute." The woman raised her hand placatingly. Then, diving inside the carriage, she took out 2 baskets of food supplies. Having shown them to the robbers, she announced that there was food there and offered to take everything. In addition, she could give them money. The baskets contained a variety of delicious food, so much so that the robbers, upon seeing it, literally began to salivate, and for a moment forgot why they were there. Ellen added that they had even more food. If they let them go, she would bring it too. "You're kidding. You think I'll believe you?" The main bald old bandit woke up. And the rest added that they should give everything they had, or they would be finished off. Mild once again stood up to protect the lady, blocking her with his body and holding his sword forward. However, the Countess was not satisfied with this, and, despite the knight's indignation, she took a step forward. A brave woman walked up to one of the bandits and kicked him in the chin. And when the man fell, struck by an unprecedented force, she looked defiantly at the other bandits. "Don't move!" Mild hurried to point his sword at the man lying on the ground. "I am Countess Maurice, the mistress of the estate. If you attack me, the Count, who loves me madly, will take cruel revenge on you," said Ellen. Mild, like the other guards, gaped in surprise, not believing a single word she said. Ellen was shocked by their reaction. Couldn't they just play along with her? The woman then continued, offering the bandits a choice: either stop robbing and get a normal life, or become enemies of the Count and die. The main bandit got angry. Did she really think they would fall for this? But his enthusiasm waned when Ellen added that even if they attacked en masse, they would not defeat her knights. "Look, you still haven't understood anything," she said confidently, pointing her finger somewhere behind his back. The old man turned around in fear, expecting to see something terrible there. However, behind him stood those same baskets of food, and the involuntary saliva flowed, making me freeze as if hypnotized. And the Countess offered him to decide what he would choose: to become a target for revenge or to give up robbery and start working for her. The completely disoriented bandit leader didn't know what to say. Seeing this, Ellen suggested that he think about it while they ate. And all the other people gathered immediately began to agree with her proposal, because it would be better than becoming enemies of the Count. Deciding that this was settled for the time being, Ellen added that while they were there, she would go about her business, and the old man asked for his man to be returned. Ellen walked up to the knight, who was still standing with his sword over the bandit sitting on the ground, and asked him to lower his weapon. As soon as this was done, the man immediately rushed away from them. "I kept my promise, now it's your turn. If you don't keep yours, next time I'll kill you without a second thought," said the Countess. The old man nodded vigorously, assuring the lady that they too would keep their word. Then Ellen turned to the knight with the remark that the carriage was no longer suitable, and ordered the horses to be released. And after some time the horses were freed, not without help from those same bandits. Ellen informed Mild that she would go with him, much to the knight's surprise. She explained that she didn't want to control the horse, but in reality she just didn't know how to ride. Seeing the knight's confusion, Ellen added that if it was difficult, then it was not necessary, but he replied that everything was fine. The young man walked up to the horse from the side, knelt down and put his hands in front of him, to the great surprise of the Countess. Not understanding why the lady hesitated, Mild said that it would be more comfortable for her to sit down. Finally, with the help of the knight, Countess Morris mounted her horse. The faithful knight mounted the same horse right in front of the lady, and they set off on their journey. Already leaving, Ellen ordered the leader of the refugees to take care of the horses, since they were expensive, and the old man suggested that their man go with them. If they tried to throw dust in his eyes, then they should know that there would be no negotiations. "Don't worry, I need loyal and conscientious workers, not bandits," Ellen said, smiling. At this point, the Countess, accompanied, went on about her business. The refugees returned to their shelter in the cave, sat in a circle near the baskets of food, and thought. The old man was torn between conflicting thoughts. If he made the wrong decision, he could become a slave. He remembered the expressions on the knights' faces and realized that the Count was not so madly in love with the Countess. What a funny woman she is. Who does she take him for? The old man thought, and decided to listen to her less because she was only chatting in vain. While the robbers were eating, strange sounds were heard near the cave they had chosen. Damn, what kind of dog is this? The old man was surprised when he heard the dog barking. You must be talking about Ellen. An unfamiliar male voice was heard, and its owner entered the cave. This caused everyone sitting there to immediately jump up from their seats, asking who was coming. Before them stood a well-dressed nobleman with his faithful dog. He announced that while walking his dog, he came across a carriage that had fallen into a hole, and he introduced himself as Count Philip Morris, the owner of these lands. This is the very same Count, the old man thought with surprise. And the man continued to say that if blank brought him here, then his people were involved. The chief of the refugees belatedly thought that he should have removed the obstacles on the road in advance. Capturing the Count and using him for negotiations is a great idea. If the negotiations fail, they will take the money and leave. Yes, this is our doing, he answered the Count confidently. Philip's gaze caught the empty basket, and he asked what was in it. But he instantly became angry, without waiting for an answer, realizing what had happened, that it was bad, and immediately took out his sword, threatening the refugees with reprisals. It was getting darker and darker, and Ellen was still on the road with Mild. Soon the horse slowed down, and the knight announced that this was the building they needed. It looked like someone was living here, Ellen noticed, but the look of the task was depressing. She still checked with the knight whether they had really arrived where they needed to, and Mild confirmed that everything was correct. Standing in front of the closed door, Ellen noticed that the house looked like a haunted house. Soon, a girl opened the door in response to a knock, and almost screamed in horror when she saw who was standing on the threshold. Right in front of her stood Countess Ellen Morris herself, and several of her loyal knights with swords at the ready. The girl fell to her knees before her mistress, begging for mercy. "Put away your swords, you scared her!" Ellen gave a sign to the knights. "Don't be afraid, we didn't come for this," she said to the frightened girl. But she still trembled with fear, because the Countess came herself, and also continued to ask for mercy for her. "It has become very difficult to survive. My father is sick," the girl sobbed, promising to repay the debt as soon as possible and only begging not to sell her. Ellen tried to calm her down, but she still asked her not to sell her, otherwise her father would die. Not understanding what was happening, the Countess looked questioningly at the knight, and Mild told her that the lady was engaged in usury here, or rather, as she put it, was showing them mercy. Then the knight asked to step aside, since the Count knew nothing about it. Ellen followed Mild, thinking about lending money to the poor and what it all meant. "You did lend money to some of the residents," Mild said quietly. When the woman asked again in surprise, the knight wondered if she really didn't remember it. And pretending to remember, the Countess added that she seemed to be out of her mind when she signed the divorce papers. She even wanted to die, which is probably why she has memory lapses. If the knight is suddenly asked about this, then let him explain everything exactly like this. But in any case, Mild added that she might not remember it, but she lent money to the residents and hid it from the Count. However, the Countess was interested in what would happen next, and the knight said that people who commit crimes would be executed. "So everything is lost?" the woman asked. The worried knight assumed that there were notes left somewhere and asked if the lady remembered where they were. But Ellen rightly noted that if she had known, she would not have asked. It seems that the divorce was actually a huge blow for the Countess. Supporting the legend, Ellen noted that some people may actually even commit suicide because of this. The shock is so strong. And then they returned to the girl, still sitting on the ground, asking for forgiveness. Ellen asked her to stop crying because if she continued to cry, she would make her pay back the debt just because it was getting on her nerves. "Wash up, we have something important to discuss," Countess Ellen Morris ordered. Walking inside and sitting at the table, the woman was surprised that the building was still standing despite such a wind. The interior left much to be desired, everything looked quite rotten, and the staircase leading to the second floor was clearly rotten. Soon the girl returned, having tried to calm down and tidy herself up. She also sat down at the table and again asked the Countess to forgive her, promising to earn money as soon as possible. "When are you going to pay back the debt?" Ellen asked, and she replied that she would try to do it as soon as possible. Then the Countess asked if she could earn money by making candles, to which the girl replied that she could harvest crops and also sell wheat or chickens. She owed Lady Maurice 5 gold pieces, including interest, but if she was sent to the inn, according to the letter that had been sent, her father would die of grief. Ellen understood from her words that she had promised to sell her to a tavern, a real moneylender, nothing less. "Save me, madam. I am ready to do anything just to stay with my father." The girl raised her tear-stained eyes to her. Ellen asked again if she was really ready for everything, and the girl nodded affirmatively. Ellen asked again if she could make candles, to which the girl remarked in surprise that candle production was unprofitable. But the Countess insisted, and the girl was forced to agree to try, but the place was too old to use as a workshop. "I will help you set up the workshop and pay you for your work, as well as hire workers," added the Countess. And these words left the girl in great surprise. Ellen suggested doing what she was good at. Then she would forgive her debt and help her earn money. "Now stop crying!" Ellen shouted at her, noticing tears in her eyes. Then she called the knight, who immediately brought a small box with candles. Inside there were 12 small candles of different colors, and the Countess took out one of them. Then she lit a candle, which almost immediately released a pleasant aroma. However, I noticed that the scent seemed to not mix well. But the girl sincerely admired this candle and asked how the lady came up with this idea. And this was just a trial version, reflecting the main idea. Ellen herself does not understand this well, so she needs a specialist. "This is real art, blessed by the gods. Leave it to me, madam," the girl said enthusiastically. "Well then, let's start with signing the contract." Ellen put on her businesswoman act. Meanwhile, Philip, sword in hand, towered over the kneeling, beaten men. "So you are not robbers, but refugees, and my wife told you to wait for her here," he asked them. The old man confirmed his words and added that the Countess had shown them mercy when they were hungry. But Philip still did not believe their words mercy and Ellen were incompatible, and when he heard that she personally brought them food and went off on business, he was forced to admit that she had really changed lately. However, Ellen Morris is not one to change so easily. The old man was thinking at this time that they had to come up with something else, otherwise they would all be killed. Having thought of something, he confidently turned to the Count standing in front of him. Deciding that it was better to become her servants than to die here, he enthusiastically declared that they were unfortunate souls whom the Countess had taken under her wing. Listening to him, Philip thought that they had no idea how stern the Countess was. And when the old man said that if he had only known that he was her husband, he would have bowed his head without hesitation. But the Count had named himself, and they still continued to mock and be rude. The old man hung his head, realizing that he had made a huge mistake in his life. But he still tried to justify himself by saying that he thought someone was impersonating him. They thought he was an imposter. Philip, of course, didn't believe them, but if Ellen wasn't here, then there was something to think about. At that moment, another gang of bandits was approaching them, this time more brutal, judging by their appearance. Even Blank immediately growled at them, sensing the threat emanating from the approaching people. The new bandits mockingly said that as soon as they left the forest for a couple of days, beggars had already settled there. "You are the same bandits who have been causing a stir in these parts lately," the Count realized. However, the bandits were not happy with being called robbers. They would have liked to be addressed as Lord Robbers, and they laughed self-confidently. "Put out everything you have." They put their weapons forward. Philip realized that the refugees were indeed telling the truth and decided to punish the real bandits for their ignorance. Then he confidently put his sword forward, preparing to attack, and the next moment he rushed at the first robber, who did not expect this. However, Philippe used not only her sword, but also her arms and legs, kicking another bandit in the nose. The bandit fell to the ground in surprise, crying out in pain, and Philip rushed to the next one, skillfully wielding his sword. The tip of the sword touched the bandit's throat and froze for a few seconds. Still kneeling, the refugees watched in awe as the events unfolded before them. Soon all the new bandits were lying on the ground, defeated by Count Morris. "Tie them up," he briefly ordered the refugees. The old man and his men obeyed without question and tied up the real robbers. A little later, when everything was done, they looked at the fallen with a sense of duty accomplished. Then Philip asked when Ellen promised to return and received the answer that she would be back in about an hour. "Damn it, if she sees this, he'll be in trouble." Count Morris was frightened, and he asked the old man not to tell the Countess that he was here. Let them consider these robbers as their captives and not mention him in any way. He proposed to recognize this as their achievement and issue them a certificate of residence. These words brought the old man into indescribable delight and admiration. The Count added that there was only one condition. Ellen must not know that he was here, and the old man immediately replied that they had never seen him. With a sense of duty accomplished, Philip and his faithful dog Blank set off away from this place. If they don't tell the Countess, she will never know what he did. But perhaps, having learned how cleverly he caught the robbers, she might finally look at him differently. His imagination painted him a picture of Ellen admiring how charming he was. Although, if you think about it, there is no need for this. While thinking about this, the Count continued to stand at the exit of the cave, to the general surprise of the refugees. No, what if she guesses Philip couldn't decide what to do? In the end, he made what one would hope was the right decision, and said that it was better to say nothing, just in case. And the refugees repeated that they had never seen the Count, and would not say anything. A few minutes after Philip left, Ellen returned to find that the atmosphere in the camp had completely changed. "Who is this? What happened here?" she asked in surprise, because besides the refugees she had left here, there was also a bunch of tied-up bandits. The old man said that they had decided to submit to the will of the Countess and were going to eat. But then these guys attacked them, forcing them to defend themselves, and a fight began. The real robbers were sitting on the ground with their heads down. However, the Countess was interested in why the atmosphere was so tense, and the old man explained that it was very difficult for them to catch them. Then the chief among the refugees, on behalf of his people, asked permission to stay and live as decent residents of the estate of Countess Morris. Ellen personally didn't mind, but she doubted whether Philip would allow it. Then the Countess added that she had sent a messenger to the Count and would inform them as soon as she received an answer. In fact, this knight returned much faster than she expected, and not alone. What happened? Why are there so many carts? The woman wondered. The knight messenger replied that he also didn't know when he arrived. Everything was already ready. The Count even sent prison carts in case it was necessary to transport criminals. Mild remarked that this was very convenient, and that they would thus transport the prisoners. Could Philip possibly have some abilities that she didn't know about? The Countess wondered. Soon all the carts, along with the refugees and robbers, arrived at the Morris estate. However, the Countess did not leave her carriage, and Philip was forced to look inside, finding the woman sleeping there. "Don't you dare wake her up! I'll carry her in my arms," he ordered the knights. Carefully taking his wife in his arms, he thought that since she didn't wake up, it meant she was very tired. As soon as he lifted the woman completely, she pressed her whole body against him with a smile in her sleep. With careful steps, Philip carried his sleeping wife to her chambers. Soon they were in the Countess's room, and Ellen never woke up. The Count carefully laid his wife on the bed and stroked her head. The next moment, Ellen pulled the man towards her in one swift movement, not wanting him to leave. And to Philip's amazement, she kissed him right on the lips. "Countess, do you want me to stay here overnight?" he asked in surprise. "Yes, that's right." Confirming his words, Ellen kissed him again, drowning in passion. She ran her hand down his neck, sending shivers down his body. Their kisses became more and more passionate, turning them both on more and more. A gentle smile appeared on Ellen's lips, which was exactly what she wanted right now. The next morning at the estate was bright and sunny. Lying in her bed, Ellen squinted at the bright light that had woken her. Then she felt some discomfort and was surprised to find that she was completely naked under the blanket. Gradually realizing what was happening, she cautiously turned her head to the side. Next to her, also naked and covered with a blanket, lay Philip in her bed. She screamed out loud from the sudden realization. Awakened by her scream, Philip asked in fear what had happened, and the woman, obeying the instincts of self-preservation, pushed him hard in the shoulder. The Count, not expecting such a reaction, fell to the floor next to the bed in surprise. What was this? Ellen understood on the edge of her consciousness, but she couldn't believe it. "Wait a minute." The man from the floor raised his hand in a conciliatory manner. "Countess, it's me!" Philip finally stood up, thinking that she simply didn't recognize him in her sleep. And it seems that Ellen really only now realized who this man was. But then she became indignant. How could one pester a sleeping woman, even if she was your wife, thereby surprising the Count? "You were pestering me. Have you forgotten that we are now in a period of reflection before the divorce?" Ellen indignantly covered herself with the blanket. But the Count insisted that he had received her consent, while the man's hands clenched into fists from an excess of emotion. The woman was indignant that she did not remember giving any consent. This is not the first time. How much more can this happen? And yesterday it was you who seduced me." The Count was sincerely upset by his wife's behavior. The last words and the whole appearance of the man made Ellen believe that she had really done it. And Philip explained that he had brought her here when she had fallen asleep in the carriage, and then kissed her. "Yes, first you kissed me, and then you said you wanted me." He was on the verge of a breakdown. The Countess was shocked by everything, by his emotions, by her behavior, by everything that happened. The Count apologized for taking her words as consent, and with his head down, he left Countess Morris's room. When the door closed behind him, Ellen felt a pang of conscience. It turned out that it was she who seduced Philip, and he completely succumbed. She must be crazy to think about it. But why did Philip succumb to her temptation if he didn't like her? Moreover, it was so passionate that now she feels every cell of her body. It seems dangerous. If it continues like this, she might get drawn in. But this can't be done. She has a lot to do, so it's better to avoid Philip for a while. Having cleaned herself up after a busy night, Ellen went outside. "Madam, how are you feeling?" Mild asked her as he approached. So much so that the Countess blushed, wondering why he was asking. Having answered that everything was fine, she asked where Mr. Poulter and the others were, and received the answer that there was an empty building in the forest and the Count had ordered them to stop there. Deciding that everything was in order, Ellen ordered the carriage to be prepared. She needed to go to the city again. Soon everything was ready, and Countess Maurice went to the city on business. Heading towards one of the buildings, the woman slowly got out of the carriage. The assignment was old, but if she tidied it up a bit, it could be used as a workshop. She decided to sell the other houses, which would allow her to rent a decent building for a year. The house she arrived at was the one she wanted to rent. However, the real estate agent hired before this incident apologized to the Countess for the fact that the owner of the building wanted to sell it. Ellen planned to live here and buy it in a year, but the man added that the owner insisted on an immediate sale. In this case, Countess Morris expressed a desire to immediately talk to the owner of the building about business. Ellen was led inside the building and drank tea while waiting for the owner to arrive. Soon the door opened and the same real estate agent appeared on the threshold. He apologized to the lady, but the owner of the building said that he could not come because of work. "Work? What work?" Ellen asked, putting her cup on the saucer. The man explained that the owner was a flower arranger. The Countess was indignant and asked to convey that if he did not come, the tax laws might change slightly. After another half hour, a tall, fair-haired man wearing glasses finally appeared on the threshold. "I tried to avoid meeting for your comfort," he began without looking at the Countess. But here he was, just as she wanted, and he wonders if she dares to tell him everything to his face. Listening to him, Ellen thought only about the abundance of handsome men in this world. "You are still as arrogant and handsome as ever," the man said, sitting down opposite her, and the woman was surprised that he knew her. Finally, the man looked up at her and replied that, of course, he knew, and he pronounced her name in a special way, but then he corrected himself and called her Countess Maurice. The woman was perplexed. He really knows her. However, the young man noticed that they had not seen each other for a long time, and she was looking at him so calmly. "Have you really forgotten me?" And the Countess mentally wondered what Ellen had done again. The man said with a grin that she couldn't have forgotten him, but Ellen had nothing to say. "I don't remember you." She decided to tell the truth, which stunned him. When she repeated that she didn't remember him at all, her words finally reached the man, and his mouth opened wide in surprise. At that moment, the real estate agent entered the room again, and motioning for him to sit down on the sofa, the Countess said that since the owner of the building had come, all the conditions needed to be discussed. She would rent the building for a year, and then buy it for the full price. But the fair-haired man didn't seem to hear her. He was sadly wondering how this was possible. The Countess placed the documents on the table in front of him and asked if her conditions seemed absurd to him. The owner of the building motioned to the real estate agent to come out and wait until he called him. The Countess looked at Mild and asked if he knew this man, and the knight only shook his head. "Okay, Mild, you can stay and tell me," she said. "How casually you do it, Madame Ellen Bourbon Renoir." The man sighed with displeasure, making the woman surprised that he knew her name before marriage, and she added that she simply said honestly that she didn't know him. What was the problem with giving her name? And again surprised the young man. "Alexander Zephyros Bourbon," he introduced himself officially and with some pathos. Hearing this name, namely Bourbon, Ellen realized that he was from the royal family. "You are really harsh. You don't even call me Arja." The man was upset by her behavior. Had she really forgotten all those warm feelings that were between them? The woman was surprised at what he meant by this, and to Ellen's great indignation, the fair-haired young man explained that she had dated him before and then married him. Seeking support from the knight, Ellen asked if he knew about this, but judging by his expression, he did not. Realizing that they might not believe him, Alexander showed a special gold ring on his finger. Mild immediately bowed and apologized to His Highness for not recognizing him. "This is the 7th principal of the Bourbon family. I saw it when I was 12 years old," he told his mistress. The woman was again mentally indignant that Ellen Morris had managed to do something weird here too. Stop, so this is an acquaintance and even someone with whom she had a relationship. Having handed him the documents again, the woman suggested that they first finish their business and then discuss their common past. Alexander said that she was really cold-blooded, but agreed to do so. After some time, all the issues were discussed and the lease agreement was stamped. So, about talking, the man returned to the question that had been bothering him a lot. And the next moment he realized that he hadn't even read the document properly, but had already put his seal on it. But Ellen was already taking the papers, thanking her for the work done. "Okay, I'll read it again and pay on time, Arji," she smiled expressively. And Prince Bourbon, who was about to take the documents to check them, froze with his hand outstretched, blinded by her smile. Well, so be it, to be honest. He was going to sell this building earlier, before the situation got worse." Hearing the words about the worsening situation, Ellen became wary. It seems that he knows something, but in any case, she should not say it out loud. "This is the first time you have thanked me." The man seemed incredibly happy about it. A pleased Ellen added that thanks to him, she would be able to speed up her affairs. However, Alexander noticed that she called the affairs her own. Surely the Count wasn't doing this. And when Ellen confirmed this, he added with a grin that it looked like they wouldn't be able to avoid divorce this time. It was strange for the Countess to hear words about divorce from a person she knew, but was essentially a stranger. "So now you can marry me," Alexander added confidently. Ellen was dumbfounded. What nonsense. Why should she marry him? "It doesn't matter whether you are divorced or married. I love you," Prince Bourbon said, blushing and looking straight into her eyes. Ellen was seriously frightened by his persistence, and getting up from her seat said that since the contract was signed, she was leaving. However, the man was not going to let her go so easily, asking her to wait. He grabbed her hand. Ellen screamed in surprise, and besides, his grip was quite strong. "Your Highness, this is too much." Mild stood between her and the prince, protecting his mistress. Further events happened with unimaginable speed. Shouting for him not to interfere, Alexander gave the knight a resounding slap in the face. A disconcerted Mild, his cheek red from the blow, looked silently at the prince. But Ellen instantly became angry. How dare he raise his hand against her knight? The next second, without thinking, she kicked the 7th Prince of Bourbon in the knee with all her might. From such a blow, Alexander immediately bent over, rubbing his bruised leg. "Madam, please calm down. This man is a prince of the Bourbon family," the knight said in fear. Ellen herself realized that she had acted too rashly, but in her defense, she said that if he had not grabbed her so roughly, this would not have happened. Repeating once again that she was leaving, the Countess and the knight hurried out of the room despite Alexander's attempts to stop her. Turning around, she added that if he wanted to create a scandal, then let him do it through her husband. As she left the room, she heard the prince agree with her words and was going to tell the Count about everything soon. Alexander followed them outside and simply watched as Ellen got into the carriage. However, the Countess had no intention of paying attention to this man and simply turned away from him. How annoying he is, she thought, still feeling indignation in her soul. Maybe she should have been more restrained, the woman thought. Count Philip Morris was at this time pondering over what had happened to his wife. All her words last night, are they true? What if she really isn't his wife? Ellen had said this last night before it all happened. After their kiss, she had fallen asleep again, and Philip had decided he would just lie next to her and sleep quietly. But looking at the peacefully sleeping woman, for some reason he felt a huge heaviness in his soul. He took off his shirt so he could finally lie down on the bed and fall asleep. And at that moment, Ellen turned over in her sleep and hugged him tightly around the waist. He couldn't get her hands off his body and had to lie down on the bed like that. Looking at his sleeping wife, the man thought about everything that had happened recently. Outwardly, she remained the same, but why is it like she is a different person? At this moment, Ellen opened her eyes but seemed to still be asleep. She called his name and the man blushed. Running her hand over his bare torso, she informed him that she was not Ellen, but from another world and moved into her body. Philip also stroked her cheek and noticed that she had changed a lot, had become better, like a different person. And he liked it. Lying there, hugging each other, they decided that even if everything was really like that, they didn't care. They just felt good together. It was an amazing night, so much so that Philip considered calling off the divorce. However, what happened in the morning already worried him greatly. Telling himself to pull himself together, he decided that this might just be another one of Ellen's tricks, and he needs to avoid her for some time. If he doesn't see her, this crazy craving will fade away. He also remembered that Ellen was supposed to teach Lila her secret move tomorrow, and wondered if he should go too. The next day, Countess Ellen Morris got ready in the morning in a different way than usual. It was her protégé's taekwondo training day, and she was fully prepared for it. Standing in the middle of the spacious room, Ellen reflected on the events of the past days. Philip will also be at this lesson. How can she look him in the eyes? For the last few days, all she's done is kick the men around her, refusing both of them. But Alexander worries her more than Philip. Maybe it's worth telling her about everything in advance. Interrupting her thoughts, Layla appeared in the room accompanied by maids, but Philip was nowhere to be seen. Probably he was offended because of yesterday. When the daughter-in-law saw her mother-in-law, she was indescribably delighted, and the maids were very surprised by the Countess's appearance. Deciding that it was okay to be nervous after everything the previous Ellen had done, the woman pushed all thoughts aside and happily called Layla over to her. She noted that the girl looked great, but still not appropriate. If you want to learn martial arts, you should wear something more comfortable like hers. Oh, forgive me, Mother. I just didn't know. The girl immediately apologized in fear, and Ellen was a little shocked by her behavior. She asked not to be afraid of her, and apologized for her words, and then asked the maids to bring her a smooth wooden board. One of the maids immediately rushed to carry out her mistress's order, and Ellen sent Layla to change into something that did not restrict her movements, and the girl officially accepted the order. As Ellen watched her daughter-in-law retreat to her room with the maids, she was burning with impatience. After a while, Layla returned, dressed in comfortable trousers. "Let's start training in taekwondo," Ellen announced. And having offered the girl to sit down on the sofa, she asked her to watch her movements carefully. One by one, Ellen demonstrated various elements of taekwondo using her legs. When she finished, she was glad that she had not lost her skill, and Layla sat on the sofa with her eyes wide with delight. Ellen then ordered the maids to hold one of the boards she had brought together, but the girls begged for mercy. Although the Countess noted that she had not said that she would hit them, she still had to listen to the girls telling her that they would try harder and asking for mercy. Realizing that they were too afraid of her, Ellen's gaze fell on the window. Approaching it and opening the doors, she loudly called the gardener's name. Noticing him, she asked the young man to come up to the room. Immediately, she added, seeing that he was in no hurry to carry out her order. The next second he rushed into the house, throwing away the scissors he was holding in his hands. And already half a minute later, a breathless young man stood on the threshold of the room, wondering how he could be of help. Ellen pointed to the boards on the table and told him to take one and hold it the way she told him to. He took the top board in his hands. He held it awkwardly, and the Countess corrected him a little, adding that if he breaks it with a blow, then he should just take a new one. Having taken a fighting stance, the Countess ordered to hold the board more firmly. The next moment she swung and turned and kicked the board. There was a loud crack, and from such a strong blow, the board in the gardener's hands broke in half. Everything happened so quickly that no one understood anything. Hyde screamed in fear. The board cracked and fell apart in his hands. Layla and the maids who were watching this reception also opened their mouths, not understanding how this was possible. Their reaction was certainly pleasing to Ellen, who was pleased with her work. However, out of the corner of her eye, she noticed something else that made her worry. The woman thought there was something outside the window. She went back to the open window and looked around carefully. She noticed Philip on the side of the ledge and asked in bewilderment what he was doing. The whole situation looked extremely absurd because Count Morris was standing on the ledge near the window at the level of the third floor. "Okay, just go inside already," said the Countess. "No, it's just that the weather is nice, and I'm here enjoying the sun." He tried to make an awkward excuse to the men. Deciding that she could do as she pleased, Ellen turned around and intended to return to her room. Fearing that he would actually remain on the ledge, Philip had already stepped over the windowsill and entered the room, to the great surprise of his daughter-in-law and the maids. And now 2 men were standing with boards in their hands, as directed by Countess Morris. This is what she can do, Philip thought with delight. Ellen assumed a fighting stance again, intending to show off another taekwondo move, shouting for them to hold on tighter as she ran towards them. Having prepared herself, the woman began to perform a more complex technique. With 2 precise blows, she instantly split 2 wooden boards in the hands of the Count and the gardener. And then she landed softly on both feet, completing the move. Luckily, everything worked out for her. Ellen was very pleased with herself. "Mother, it was incredible," Layla exclaimed, as did the maids behind her. Ellen asked if her daughter-in-law was okay or if she was scared by such methods. But the girl still couldn't get over her delight, saying that it was amazing, absolutely crazy. The Countess was relieved to see that everything had gone smoothly, and Layla confessed her love to her, adding that she now understood her deep intentions. What kind of deep idea was this? The Countess had absolutely no idea what the girl was talking about. "The more you get hit, the stronger you become," Layla asked excitedly. It seemed that taekwondo had clouded her mind. Now she was thinking about something strange, Ellen realized, listening to the girl confidently say that all this was so that she would become stronger, and did not immediately realize it. Be that as it may, the result is not bad, even excellent, and if everything goes according to her plan, then she will be able to solve Layla's problem. Which is why Ellen agreed with the girl's words. And only Philip tried to prove that this was not so. But the Countess cast such a meaningful glance at him that he immediately stopped short. "I was just wondering if I could repeat that hit," he said thoughtfully. And then he remembered that he was, after all, the owner of this house, and called the gardener, who immediately came to the call. "Take away these broken boards," he ordered Haid. And Ellen suggested that the girl study the basic techniques, and she happily agreed. It took about an hour to teach Layla simple movements the girl did not lag behind, diligently repeating everything that the Countess showed. Philip did not leave until the very end, watching them with fascination. And when the classes were over, they all left the room together. But the Count held his wife back and whispered to her if he could learn to do this too. However, before Ellen could answer, the butler Domingos appeared in front of them. He came with the news that a letter had arrived from Alexander Zephyros, Prince of Bourbon. And when Philip was surprised at what the prince wanted from him, he explained that he was going to visit them that afternoon at 2 o'clock. Hearing a name she didn't want to hear, Ellen became very wary. Why did her ex suddenly want to see her current husband? It must be because of what happened yesterday. "And at 3 o'clock he would like to meet you separately," added the butler, turning to the Countess. Philip remarked that he must be received with respect, as a cousin, and the servant accepted the order. The Count then turned to his wife, asking what she was going to do, whether she was going to meet with Prince Bourbon, while Ellen was worried that everyone would find out how she hit Alexander and that he was Ellen's ex. That's why she replied that no, she wouldn't meet with him. "I don't like unannounced visits," the woman said categorically. Philip told the butler that he would be the only one to meet with the guest today. Ellen was planning to leave the house during the guest's visit, and she was thinking that she didn't want to see him not because of fear, but because of disgust. Mild, who was accompanying the lady, noticed a basket of buns in her hands and asked why she needed it, to which Ellen replied that she wanted to give it to the refugees. Then the knight offered his help and took the basket from the lady's hands. He also offered to bring horses, but Ellen stopped him, saying that they would go on foot. To Milda's reasonable objection that it was too far to walk, she said that it was no big deal. As she was leaving, the Countess turned around and saw the Count waving at her through the window. She had barely left the gate when she heard the call of the maids. The girls hurried to her with the same baskets of bread and said that the master had ordered them to take more bread with them for the refugees. The woman, surprised by Philip's behavior, thought it was strange, because he had not liked this before. Assuming that it might be because they helped get rid of the bandits, he acknowledged their merits and even gave them the right to become residents of his lands. The woman was glad that the issue was resolved so easily, but something was wrong. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, a richly decorated carriage drove up to the entrance of the house. As soon as a man appeared from it, Count Morris greeted His Majesty with respect. Alexander Bourbon, sparkling like a diamond, also greeted Philippe and asked how he was doing, since they had not seen each other for so long. Count Morris was genuinely glad to see the Prince of Bourbon again and invited him into the house. Soon the important guest was invited into the guest room, where he was offered tea. In fact, Philip was perplexed as to what Alexander wanted had he really come to discuss a contract with Ellen. Earlier, he had asked his wife what her dealings were with the Prince of Bourbon, and she had replied that she had rented his building on Fifth Avenue, although there had been some problems along the way. When Philip learned exactly what building she had rented, he was very surprised. After all, he had already tried to rent this place a few months ago and had been refused, so how did she manage to sign a contract? "I was just being very persistent," the woman said. Then Ellen talked about property laws, so he came to demand compensation, Philip assumed. While drinking tea, he thought that Alexander was not the type to do something like that. "Perhaps he wants to discuss political issues," the Count suggested. "What a delicious tea! Its golden hue reminds me of the color of the Countess's hair," Alexander suddenly said. Philip was puzzled as to what Ellen had to do with it. But, observing propriety, he said that he was very glad that the guest liked it. And Alexander did not stop praising the tea. He added that if the Countess were with them now, it would be much better. And these words were already beginning to irritate Philip. Wondering why the prince was saying this, he assumed that the prince valued his family. The Count agreed that Ellen could meet her cousin. "We are cousins, of course, but to consider her family is a bit strange," Prince Bourbon added with a laugh. He also noted that the Count himself knew the Countess's character very well. Tired of the prince's meaningless chatter, who most likely came to talk about the contract, the Count asked if he was not there to meet Ellen. And the prince confirmed this, noting that if he asked, perhaps she could come to them. But all his expectations were dashed when Philip added that unfortunately she was not in the mansion now. Ellen was busy with business. Her schedule had been very busy lately. "They say you filed for divorce. Maybe that's why the Countess started doing business." Alexander did not fail to prick Philip. Hearing the prince's words about divorce, Count Maurice seemed to be struck by lightning. Smiling sweetly, Alexander asked if they were really going to divorce. And to be honest, he came to find out. "If a miracle doesn't happen, we'll get divorced," Philip answered in a rough voice, not understanding why he was interfering in this. However, the words that Ellen was trying to impress again made Philip look at him questioningly. "Oh, you don't have to worry, Count. This is just between me and Ellen," the guest added in a mysterious voice. But Philip understood that something was wrong here, and he still wanted to know what was going on, which he told the man sitting opposite him. "The Countess is still mine, my wife, I mean," he stated unquestioningly, when Alexander tried to say something about them getting divorced soon. Philip noticed that Alexander's face suddenly became calmer, and he continued that shouldn't a husband know everything that concerns his wife? The prince asked if he really wanted to know, and when Count Maurice confirmed this, he agreed to tell everything. After all, they are almost divorced anyway, so there is no point in hiding it. The thing is, Alexander Bourbon began his story about what happened last evening in the house. In the end, he added that he was a little traumatized after that quarrel and looked at the Count with anticipation, although he did not believe that Ellen could do such a thing. The prince assured that this was the pure truth without any exaggeration. He even rolled up his trousers to show the bruise that remained on his leg. This time Ellen had really crossed the line, Philip thought worriedly. Assaulting a person of royal blood is a crime. Even for Countess Maurice, it seems to be true. At this time, Ellen, accompanied by her faithful knight, finally reached the refugees' home. Bringing the breadbasket myself turned out to be a great idea. Their new inhabitants greeted the arrival of their mistress with delight and admiration. "Madam, you are simply a saint," the old man admired, barely containing his emotion. People also added that they were ready to do anything for her, no matter what she asked. And Ellen was really happy with her work because she even managed to draw up the rental agreement perfectly. Returning to the estate, Miles turned to his mistress in surprise. There was a richly decorated carriage parked right in front of the entrance, and they realized that the distinguished guest was still there. A butler was hurrying towards them with an urgent message. "Madam, the gentleman ordered me to accompany you." He bowed, turning to the Countess. Saying that she was busy at the moment, Ellen decided to send Mild, since he was there and would be able to explain everything. What exactly did this eccentric prince manage to tell Count Morris? Soon the butler brought Countess Morris's knight to meet the count and his guest. "Where is Ellen?" both men asked in unison. Domingos bowed and reported that she could not come yet, so she sent Sir Mild. Alexander noticed that she seemed to understand how serious this was. At this time, the knight bowed in greeting and said that the lady had instructed him to tell about that incident. Then begin. "Tell everything that happened that day. Everything that happened between Ellen and His Highness," Philip ordered. Mild glanced quickly at the prince and asked if he should tell him everything in detail. His gaze did not escape Philip, and he wondered why the knight was constantly looking at the guest, and he answered very irritably that everything had to be told. Mild accepted his master's order and began his story of what had happened the previous evening. He particularly focused on how Alexander asked Ellen if she could now marry him, and the countess replied that since the contract was concluded, she was leaving. "That's enough." Prince Bourbon stopped the servant's story, and although the knight tried to add that there was still an unfinished story, she interrupted him, saying that she had already told the count about it. Only Philip sat in bewilderment, listening to this story and not understanding why the prince had come at all. "What about His Highness suddenly grabbing the lady's wrist?" Mild asked. These words made the prince fidget nervously, noting that this detail could have been omitted. But as soon as the meaning of the words reached Philip, he instantly understood everything. Getting up from the sofa, he added that the knight had not finished speaking yet, and Alexander had to agree with this. Philip gave Mild a look to continue his story. The slightly confused knight continued to say that when His Highness suddenly grabbed the countess by the hand, that's when everything happened. It was then that the meaning of his words finally dawned on the count, as he simply grabbed Ellen by the hand. "It all happened so quickly," the knight said, becoming wary. "He told how he came between the countess and the prince when it happened, and how he got a slap in the face for crossing the line, and even the way Ellen protected the knight when she saw his red cheek. So the countess kicked the gentleman," the knight finished, embarrassed. "Your Highness, you took Ellen's hand! How could you touch my wife without permission?" Maurice was indignant. An embarrassed Alexander agreed that it was wrong, but still, hitting a member of the royal family was too much. He didn't have time to finish speaking, because Philip, overcome with anger, hit him in the face with his fist with all his might. So much so that the prince's face became distorted, and the skin at the site of the blow instantly turned red. The man, struck dead, slowly began to sink to the floor, and a moment later, having lost consciousness completely, he fell onto the carpet. The situation was out of the ordinary. Earl Morris, the butler, and the knight looked in shock at the 7th Prince of Bourbon lying on the floor. Domingos was the first to recover from the shock and came to check on the condition of His Majesty. After examining the man, he reported with horror that the prince had lost consciousness. Philip also decided to check on the guest, shook him and asked him to wake up. But consciousness completely left the man after the deafening blow. Domingos whispered to ask if he should send for a doctor. Philip clearly realized that if something happened to the prince, they would be in big trouble. This situation was much more serious than what Ellen had done. Almost a disaster. Countess Morris, having returned from her walk and changed her clothes, was showing off in front of the mirror, enjoying the freshness. She wondered if Mild had managed to sort this out, and she hoped that the knight would not come under attack again. However, enough time had passed and she could not wait any longer. Ellen decided to go and find out what was going on there. She walked slowly into the living room and saw all the maids standing in front of the door. Confused about what was going on, Ellen walked into the room and noticed that there was no one at the table, nor in the rest of the room. Deciding that the men were discussing business in another room, she went to the next door, noticing that everything seemed calm. However, as soon as the countess opened the door, the count, the knight, and the butler who were inside jumped up in fright. She noticed that the atmosphere in the room was very gloomy and that something must have happened. By the way, where is Alexander? Did he really leave? Ellen looked around the room. Not finding a guest, she assumed that the conversation had gone well, then looked questioningly at Philip. However, the man behaved rather strangely and mumbled something about a small problem having arisen. The countess nervously assumed that Alexander had given an ultimatum and did not want to compromise. But she still decided to calm her husband down, telling him not to worry, that next time she would fix everything. Ellen tried to apologize for the whole situation, but Philip pointed out that he should be the one apologizing. The woman did not understand what the Count had to apologize for, and in general the whole situation looked strange. Even Domingos turned to the lady, saying that the Count did not mean to offend her, and at Ellen's puzzled look, Domingos simply pointed his finger at the sofa in the room and said that His Highness was there. On stiff legs, the Countess approached the sofa and discovered Alexander Bourbon lying unconscious on it. Mild explained that when it became clear that the prince had grabbed the lady by the hand, the Count could not resist and hit him. He died. Ellen was horrified, but Philip hastened to reassure her that he had simply lost consciousness. However, a huge bruise was blooming on the face of the Prince of Bourbon. "He was hit for grabbing my hand," the woman asked sadly. Philip explained that he himself did not understand why he did this. Ellen let out a tired sigh and added that it was apparently perfectly normal to beat up people of royal blood here. Everyone present in the room understood that the whole situation could lead to a real scandal. "How serious is it? Could it harm our family?" Ellen asked Philip. She summed up that she had already kicked the prince, and Philip had also punched him. It would not be easy to hush it up. Was the Count really so angry just because the prince touched her? It was actually kind of cute. Okay, now it was much more important to solve a huge problem, and after putting the prince to bed, Ellen asked those present if they remembered what they had to say and do. Philip was worried about whether this would work, but they had no other options. The butler only confirmed that there were no other options, and they would have to play it out to the end. At this moment, Prince Alexander of Bourbon made an indistinct sound, clearly returning to consciousness. The Countess pointed to the door, noting that they had to act quickly and accurately. "Oh, you're awake," she asked the prince in as worried a voice as possible, feeling terribly awkward in her soul. "But there is no other way out. Even if everything inside is turning upside down from shame, you need to do everything to save yourself from disaster." In a gentle voice, she asked Alexander to look at her. Returning to consciousness, the man saw a woman, Ellen, in front of him. She was worried about him. Unconsciously, his hands moved to his bruised cheek, and the man asked where he was, receiving in response that of course he was in Morris's house. And then Ellen grabbed Alexander's hand, giving him all the support she could. "How could you just faint? Do you have any idea how scared I was?" she said worriedly. Still slowly coming to his senses, Alexander asked the woman to slow down and not to worry. He was fine. And the Countess herself at that moment was thinking only about the fact that now they needed to focus on the next step. Following a preconceived plan, Count Morris and Knight Mild entered the room, asking if everything was all right with the guest. The Countess worriedly said that the prince was probably not feeling well, was sniffling, and Philippe also worriedly echoed her. "Don't worry, everything is fine now. He has come to his senses," the Count remarked enthusiastically, hugging his wife. Ellen watched the prince out of the corner of her eye, noting that everything was going according to plan and that Philip seemed to have real acting talent. Prince Bourbon watched the scene unfolding before him in bewilderment. Ellen returned to him and assured Argy that everything would be fine, even if he didn't worry. "Ellen, why are you so tearful because of me?" Alexander was worried about the woman's condition. The Countess wondered if she had gone too far, if there would be a bruise on his face, because she had to do something to remove the traces of the blow. Sitting on the edge of the patient's bed, she said that he was very important to her. Philip also added that Ellen was so shocked that she spent the entire day taking care of him. These words made Alexander even more emotional, wondering if the Countess was really courting him. The woman, almost in tears, said she was horrified when she learned that he had fainted. Without remembering it for sure, the man still said that he vaguely remembered fainting. "The doctor said it was overwork," Mild added. Alexander tried to say that it was possible that this was because the Count had hit him. But Ellen grabbed his hand again, saying that he kept calling for the Count in his sleep. Perhaps he was having a nightmare. She asked him again if he had really said that the Count had hit him, and the prince confirmed it. But then she added that this could only have happened in a dream. Otherwise, how could the Count have allowed himself to do something that made Alexander think? Ellen said that she had just finished changing her clothes when he suddenly staggered and fell, and she froze in place in fear. Or maybe he did it on purpose to make her worry so much, the woman asked fearfully. The prince began to assure the Countess that this was not at all the case, and that he had not done this on purpose. "You know my character, you want to fool me?" The Countess was indignant. Alexander was still trying to convince them that it was serious and his eye must be swollen from the blow. Then Ellen ordered Mild to bring the mirror, and the knight obeyed. Walking to another part of the room, he took a small mirror on a stand from the table, and he immediately handed it straight into the Countess's hands. Ellen raised the mirror to the prince's level so that he could see his reflection. And indeed, there was no bruise on Alexander's face, although he was completely sure of the opposite. "Your Majesty, you and I are certainly not the best of friends, but I would never dare to hit you," Count Morris noted. Ellen also added that no normal person would do this, and if it happened, she would leave him and choose a prince. Alexander Bourbon became embarrassed and blushed at the woman's last words. Completely relaxed, Ellen asked Arj not to worry and to get well. The convinced prince thought that perhaps he had collapsed due to overwork. And to consolidate the effect, the Countess suggested drinking a glass of wine and relaxing. When asked by the surprised prince, who did not believe what she said, she confirmed that she wanted to have a drink together and play something. "Oh, yes, Ellen, that sounds wonderful." Alexander forgot about what had happened and saw only a beautiful woman in front of him. Soon, the 7th Prince of Bourbon found himself with a glass of excellent wine in his hands. Opposite him sat Count and Countess Morris, also sipping wine from a glass. The bottles of wine were emptied one by one, and the snacks on the table were running out. A drunken Philip raised another toast to the health of His Majesty, and all three joyfully clinked glasses, repeating the toast to health. "It's so fun today we're drinking together, Ellen," the drunken prince stammered. "I'm also very glad, Arzy," echoed the no less prepared Countess Morris. Although the glasses were raised one after another, Ellen still placed the last one unfinished on the table. The woman noticed Philip's appearance. He looked quite drunk. Prince Alexander, like Count Maurice, was also very drunk. Ellen decided that that was enough and it was time to go to bed. She called the butler and ordered him to help His Majesty get to the bedroom. "Good night, Ellen," Alexander said drunkenly in a cheerful voice. Ellen had had quite a bit to drink herself and was feeling a little dizzy, so she decided she should go to bed too. However, Philip was nearby and hugging her promised that he would take care of her. And although the woman insisted that she was not drunk, Philip saw that everything was quite the opposite. Ellen's legs buckled, and she grabbed the man to keep from falling, still insisting that she was not drunk. Besides, Philip had drunk more than she and Ellen noticed that he was all wet. "It's just a bit hot," the Count replied, and without a second thought untied the tie around his neck. Then, just as slowly, he unbuttoned his shirt, trying to cool down a little. "Well, it's finally gotten cooler," he noted, flashing his bare, pumped-up torso. "Wow, what strong muscles he has!" Ellen blushed at the sight. And Philip put his arm around her waist and led her into the room, intending to take her to the bedroom. The Countess could not resist because she was drunk, and so they left the room arm in arm. When she reached her bedroom, she tried to send Philip to his room, assuring him that she would call the maids if she needed help. But the Count looked at her with such a loving gaze and blushed so deeply that she could not look away. The man gently touched her cheek with his hand and called her name, forcing her to look into his eyes. Then he kissed her gently, without encountering any resistance. Maybe to hell with it all, this isn't the first time this has happened. Without thinking, he picked up Ellen in his arms and carried her into the room. The door closed behind the drunken lovers, hiding what happened next. The next morning, like all the previous ones, was hot and sunny. Ellen opened her eyes as if she had not been sleeping and immediately remembered everything that had happened last night. Turning onto her side, she saw Philip sleeping peacefully next to her, remembering that it was delightful. And she seems to be beginning to understand why Ellen was so reluctant to get divorced. But the words he said last night about loving her made her worry. This is all not serious. He said this when he was drunk. Although, even if these were just words, it was still nice, she decided. Giving in to a surge of emotion, she gently stroked the man's hair. However, quite unexpectedly after her movement, the man turned over to the other side, thereby confusing the woman. She decided it was time to get up and hoped that Alexander was okay. Countess Morris put on her robe and left her room. Seeing a maid near the door, she asked how Mr. Alexander was and received the answer that he was still sleeping. Deciding that this was good, she ordered him not to wake him up, let him wake up on his own. It seems that everything went smoothly. If Alexander suspected something, he would have already gotten up and left the mansion. She decided that while Philip and Alexander were sleeping, she should take care of her own affairs. Having changed her clothes and gathered herself, Countess Morris went out into the street to see Mild waiting for her. "Did you have a good rest?" Madam the faithful knight asked, bowing. Ellen asked where the carriage she had requested was, and the knight replied that he had prepared it further away so as not to disturb the sleep of the lord and his majesty. The countess praised the clever knight and smiled. They walked together to the carriage that was waiting for her. Ellen sat down on the seat and thought that she needed to return before Philip and Alexander got up to have breakfast together. If they didn't see her at breakfast, they would definitely start asking about where she had been, both at the same time. Mild climbed into the front seat, took the reins of the horses, and waited for the order to go. Suddenly, a dog ran towards them, and several servants tried to catch up with him. Ellen was surprised to learn that it was Blank and wondered what was going on. The frightened servants tried to stop the dog, ordering it to stay where it was. However, the dog was very happy to see his mistress and expressed this joy vigorously, jumping up and down near the carriage. Mild also tried to stop the dog to prevent it from getting near the horses. But the dog turned out to be very cunning and, having deceived the knight, nevertheless rushed towards his mistress. Realizing that this could end badly, Ellen was seriously scared. At that moment, the horses harnessed to the carriage also saw the dog and reared up in fear. The carriage tilted and the countess, who was sitting in it, fell from the seat. The frightened servants tried to put the dog back in place, but the satisfied Blank did not listen to them. The happy dog stood with his front paws on the carriage door and looked lovingly at his mistress. "Sit down, Blank," came a loud voice ordering the dog. And the dog immediately sat down and calmed down, unquestioningly obeying this voice. And the voice belonged to Philip Morris, who came out into the street, wearing only a robe on his naked body with a sword at the ready. A servant came running to the calmed-down dog and immediately threw a leash around his neck, indignant at what he was doing. Philip ordered the dog to be tied tightly to the tree. At this point, Ellen decided to intervene and got out of the carriage, heading towards the Count. Philip turned to her and asked if she was okay and not hurt anywhere. And although Ellen assured her that everything was fine, the Count still forced her to call a doctor. "It's not worth it, really. Everything's fine now," the Countess answered. But the man still insisted. She was a little scared, of course, but she still had too much to do, the woman added, looking at the dog tied to the tree. "I understand, I'll sort it out," the Count added harshly, which really scared Ellen. "After all, he threatened you, so he needs to be punished accordingly," added Philip. Whether this meant what she thought, Ellen made a characteristic finger gesture to her neck. Philip confirmed her fears, noting that if the horse had become frightened and bolted, it could have suffered. "We'll do it quickly and painlessly," he added, his eyes flashing with rage. Frightened, Ellen shouted too loudly that she shouldn't do that. Philip suggested that she wanted to kill him herself, which took the woman by surprise. He even offered her his sword since she insisted so much, but the Countess only raised her hands in horror, saying that this was not what she meant. And she reasonably noted that the situation had occurred due to the manager's negligence, and then the Count assumed that she was going to execute the manager as well. Hearing this, the steward and the gardener immediately fell to their knees, asking for forgiveness, because they only wanted to show the stables to the knights of His Majesty. Surprised at the mention of the prince's knights, Philip looked at them questioningly, and the servants explained that the Count himself had told them to take care of their reception yesterday. Before putting on a show for Alexander, the knights needed to be dealt with, so Ellen ordered Hyde to keep them busy. "Delay the knights long enough until the prince wakes up, so that they don't come until His Majesty starts looking for them himself." And when the gardener asked until what moment the knights should be occupied, the Countess replied that, most likely, he would remember about the knights only by tomorrow morning. "I carried out the order until the morning," Hyde repented to the Count. In that case, Ellen realized that the problem was something completely different. It happened because Hyde followed her orders, but why did she give such an order in the first place? If someone hadn't done something stupid, His Majesty's knights wouldn't have gone to the stables and Blank wouldn't have run out into the street. Philip tried to say that punishment was necessary just in case it happened again. Ellen interrupted him by saying that Blank was her dog and it was her decision, although in reality she had only fed him a couple of times. "Hey, if you do that again, you'll be in trouble," she shouted to the dog, who seemed to understand everything and didn't whine. The Count offered to leave him in the stable until they left the mansion. "Be patient for a little while. As soon as the time comes, I will take him away," Ellen said after thinking for a bit. Philip's heart gave an unpleasant pang because he realized that she was talking about divorce and an imminent separation. When all matters were settled, the Countess turned to her knight and informed him that they were leaving. Watching the carriage drive away, Philip thought sadly that she was telling him to wait until she left the estate. Is she really going to leave? The Count was upset. The carriage moved along the narrow streets for a short time until it finally reached its destination. Mild gave his hand to the lady to help her down. Soon they entered one of the buildings together, in the room of which there was a large number of ready-made candles on the table, and in the fireplace nearby, liquid wax for these very candles was bubbling merrily. The guests were greeted by girls who bowed respectfully and said hello. And when Ellen asked how things were going, one of them enthusiastically told her that the equipment was good and there was plenty of materials, so she thought the product would be excellent. Countess Morris also added that if things go well, they will receive a bonus. If there is a lot of profit, they will share it with those who worked well, which made the girls incredibly happy and promised to try their best. Ellen thought contentedly that now she need not worry about any of them being lazy. Mild remarked that the lady was incredible. Even the refugees worked as hard as if it was their own business. That's how it should be, Ellen noted. Everyone benefits, but when only one side wins, it causes discontent. The knight said with delight that he had previously underestimated the lady's abilities. "Oh, don't embarrass me. You shouldn't admire me to such an extent," the Countess said, turning away. Soon a sample of the product was placed in front of her, and these candles looked amazing. As Countess Maurice examined the goods, she decided that it was time to take a more thorough approach to the matter. Taking the chest with the finished candles with them, Ellen and the knight soon arrived at Mrs. Hedes's boutique. They were met by the hostess herself, who was very happy to see them. Sitting down on the sofa, Ellen explained that she had come to sell the candles she had spoken about earlier. With an embarrassed laugh, the boutique owner noted that they had their own principles of trade. In fact, the candle market had long been monopolized by the Renoir Company, but Ellen still didn't understand what was wrong with that. Then the lady handed her some papers for review. Taking them in her hands, the Countess read them and was horrified by what was written there. "Do you want to make a deal like this? For 100 pieces for 3 months?" She asked the boutique owner, would the payment really only be after the sale? Mrs. Heeds noted that she could not give an advance on something that might not sell. Ellen said that she herself was denying her own luck, but if that was what she wanted, then they shouldn't complain later. In turn, the Countess handed her a small piece of paper on which were her prices for candles. After reading it, Mrs. Heeds was now horrified, considering it quite expensive. "I just have confidence in their quality," Ellen said. The hostess agreed. Because this was the Countess's creation, however, in her thoughts it was that no one would buy such expensive candles. But she decided to try anyway, deciding that she wouldn't end up a loser, and asked to see what kind of candles they were. And although Mild was standing right there with the box, Ellen replied that she would show them later. Otherwise, there would be no intrigue. And she asked to sign the contract first, thinking mentally that it was obvious from her that she might try to pull something off. There was no need to reveal all her trump cards ahead of time. After reviewing the papers, Ellen noticed that the contract did not have a fixed price clause, meaning it could be changed. Mrs. Heeds confirmed this with a laugh. "If it doesn't sell, then we can have a sale." "Okay, then we'll regulate prices according to circumstances," Ellen decided as she signed the contract. When the Countess handed over the documents to Mrs. Heeds, the latter asked if she was going to open a candle shop on the next street and offered to supply her goods there as well. But Ellen remarked that it was beyond her power now, and she would think about it when she became rich, to which Mrs. Heeds thought that it was impossible to make money if the huge store only sold candles. Deciding that their business was finished, Countess Morris added that she would send the goods and asked that they be put on display. The boutique owner assured them that everything would be fine, and the Countess and her faithful knight headed for the exit. However, on the way, Mild asked why the lady did not show the boutique owner the candles, to which Ellen replied that she wanted to watch them beg her for a deal later. Count Philip Morris sat thoughtfully in his office. It seemed that Ellen really didn't hate him. Yesterday, when she returned from a walk, he carefully asked her if she liked him, and when she replied that this was not so, he asked why she was avoiding him. He had hardly seen her lately. The woman replied that she was busy with things, and Philip offered to help with that. "No need, I can handle it myself," Countess Morris said confidently. Come to think of it, he could have helped with the royal court matters, especially since the king's health was becoming an issue for Marlborough's succession to the throne. The plan is ready, but there are not enough funds, thought Count Morris. And no matter how much he tried to think about things, his thoughts kept returning to Ellen. To be honest, after that night with her, he thought there would be a stir, but he didn't expect her to take it so well. Even after everything that happened, she didn't reject him. An unexpected thought came to the man's mind, and he blushed. It seems that Ellen is not going to ask for a divorce. Does this mean that she just wants more attention? Having decided that everything was so, the man was very happy. He thought that if he was kind to Blanc, whom she cared about, then maybe she would notice him too. After some time, Count Maurice was quickly crossing the courtyard of his own estate. Marlborough and Layla, who were going about their business, noticed him and were surprised to see their father on the street at such a time. Philip asked in surprise what they were doing there, and the young people replied that they had also gone out for a walk. However, Marlborough's gaze caught on the basket that the Count was holding in his hand, and Philip explained that this was a treat for Blanc and he himself was heading to the nursery. After all, Ellen is busy with things and can't devote time to her dog, so he decided to deal with it himself. Layla has the same story. For everyone, Mom is more important. Marlborough smiled slyly and winked at his wife. The girl noticed that he used to like it when people talked about his mother, but Marlborough noticed that he also got jealous when everyone was only interested in her. Marlborough lowered his voice slightly and asked his father how to make his wife pay attention to him, and the Earl replied that he had to do whatever she liked. Hearing this answer, Marlborough was suddenly stunned by the thought that her father was doing what Ellen liked. But without intending to confirm his suspicions, Philip quickly said goodbye, wishing him a good walk, and went about his business. The young people looked at each other in surprise. They clearly understood something about their parents' relationship. That same evening, when Philip returned from the nursery, Domingos found him. While the Count was sorting out his work papers, the butler announced that he had returned. And he added that the responses had arrived to the Countess's invitations to the party she was throwing for the little hostess. It turned out that Philip was hearing about the party for the first time, and the butler explained that the lady was organizing the evening for Layla. The Count wondered if the Countess really wanted to do this, and Domingos wholeheartedly confirmed it. In fact, Philip was happy about this party. Perhaps he and Ellen would have dinner together, and, if they were lucky, even dance. He thoughtfully studied the list of guests that the butler had provided him, suddenly realized that all the guests were aristocrats from their side. This is great. They can just discuss all the business this evening. And besides, he has a chance to improve his relationship with Ellen, the Count thought, blushing. Puzzled by the gentleman's too long silence, the butler asked him what about the party. Philip, amused, replied that of course it had to be grand, and that new dresses had to be ordered for Ellen and Layla. Even more surprised by the gentleman's reaction, the butler also stared silently at the Count. That same day, only towards evening, Countess Morris returned to her room. She had been running back and forth all day and was very tired. Domingos was rushing towards her with the message that an art appraiser would arrive in 3 days. And besides, the Count said that she needed to order a new dress for the party. "He's sick, or maybe he hit his head?" she asked, puzzled, and the servant completely agreed with her. However, the meaning of the lady's words did not immediately reach him, and he looked at her in surprise. Ellen asked again about the sudden urge to order a dress, and Domingo suggested that perhaps the Count wanted her and Layla to shine at the event. Without letting him finish, Ellen said she would wear what she had, and let them forget about her dress and order a new one for Layla, only the most beautiful one. Since that was the case, Ellen decided to visit her dressing room to pick out a dress, and as soon as she entered the room, her mouth dropped open in amazement. It's just the height of luxury. How many damn dresses did the Count buy for his wife? But you have to admit, he has excellent taste. All the dresses are so elegant. The woman was thinking about choosing something special for Layla and giving it to her. On the third day, an art appraiser arrived. It turned out to be a middle-aged woman who introduced herself as Clona Hasena. The specialist was eager to examine the lady's collection because she wanted to see it so much that her heart was fluttering. "Okay, please." Ellen invited the woman to come with her. Accompanied by a butler, they arrived at the room where the collection was kept. As soon as the woman crossed the threshold of the room, her eyes sparkled with delight. Ellen asked to appraise all the items in the room, and the woman promised to determine the value as accurately as possible. As she passed the first item, she said it was worth about 20 gold. The butler, who was writing down everything the specialist said, looked at Ellen in shock, and she was also very surprised because she had been told before that it only cost 2 gold pieces. 10 gold, which is about 8 gold. The specialist named the estimated value of all the items one by one, and the Countess was surprised at how much the fat man was lying. "Oh, God!" Clona suddenly exclaimed loudly, which scared Ellen. Having taken out a magnifying glass from somewhere, Clona carefully looked at the mermaid's statuette, calling it a real masterpiece. Ellen asked, puzzled what she was talking about, and the woman replied that this mermaid figurine was a music box. The Queen of Vietnam received it as a gift when she was still a little princess, but now the Queen is ill and misses this box very much. 3 years ago, her son, the King of Vieta, offered to buy this statuette for 20 gold pieces, but now its value has increased to 1,000 gold pieces. Hearing such an unusually high amount, Ellen was literally delighted. It was incredible. Clona noted that if the lady decided to sell it, she would help organize the deal. Moreover, the specialist insisted on hurrying with this, but the Countess did not understand what the rush was for. Still, Ellen was interested in how much the appraiser thought her entire collection was worth. When Clona finished calculating, the total cost, according to Domingos's notes, was 90,000 gold pieces, to the incredible surprise of Countess Morris. 90,000 gold? She asked the servant hesitantly, and the equally shocked butler confirmed it. Ellen may have been a villain, but she had an impeccable eye for art. It looks like she will be able to get a divorce with a clear conscience and not end up in poverty. On the day of the party, numerous richly decorated carriages of aristocrats arrived at the Morris estate. On this day, the maids helped Ellen get ready and dress up for the gala evening. "Madam, the party has begun." Philip Morris entered the room and Ellen caught her breath. She never thought a man could be so handsome. Looking at her, Philip felt the same, as his face turned deeply red. To calm himself, he exhaled slowly, bringing himself to his senses. Noticing his exhalation, Ellen asked if there was something wrong. Perhaps the outfit didn't suit her, but Philip assured her that everything was fine. "I seem to be beginning to understand one poet," the man said suddenly, holding out his hand to her. "This poet said it was so beautiful that it took your breath away." These words sent shivers down the woman's spine. She extended her hand to him in response, ordering herself to pull herself together and not lose her head. In order to live well in this world, she needed to stay away from alcohol, gambling, and Philip. Countess Morris, accompanied by the Count, descended into the ballroom and froze in admiration. Everything was so exquisite. In the spacious hall, musicians played live music on instruments and invited aristocrats engaged in social conversation. Marlborough and Layla approached their parents and thanked them for the wonderful party. Ellen was very glad that they were happy and asked them to enjoy the evening. "Perhaps you will dance with me, madam," Philip suddenly suggested, and the woman was frightened because she did not know how to dance at all. However, being in the ballroom among the dancing people, she could not refuse the Count, but did not understand what to do. "Madam," the Count repeated his invitation, holding out his hand to her in anticipation. Trying to hide her embarrassment, Ellen said that she didn't think she could do the waltz. She had been so busy today that she was tired. Without accepting any objections, the man reached out and pulled the woman towards him by the waist. He noticed that there was nothing difficult in the waltz and began to dance. He asked Ellen to follow him and not to strain herself, but the woman thought that she did not understand what to do at all. She was nervous because if she stepped on his foot, everyone would laugh. "Look at me," she heard Philip's voice next to her. He said that from now on her eyes would only be his. The Countess blushed deeply at how sweet his voice was. They continued dancing, and the Count remarked that it was not so difficult, but Ellen felt as if she was going to die. However, her mood was still good despite some obstacles. In fact, the evening was even fun. All the people around enjoyed dancing. When the music stopped playing, Philip leaned over and whispered in her ear that he hadn't danced like this for a long time, and it pleased him. After making a final bow, the Count and Countess finally finished their dance. The man's gaze met the woman's, and it seemed as if he wanted to tell her something. And Ellen's gaze caught on a couple who had just entered the ballroom. Or rather, she recognized the woman. Black hair, a pearl necklace, and earrings. Could it really be her? The Countess was surprised. Delena, second wife of Earl Philip Morris. But in the original, Delena appears only after the divorce. This moment is also different from what was originally. What does she even hope for? Philip has a lover, conceived by the author for him. At this moment, Count Morris approached the arriving guests and happily greeted Enoch. Hugging the man, he asked why it was taking so long, to which the guest apologized, explaining that he had been delayed on the road with Lady Sora. "Let me introduce you to Delena, the daughter of Count Sora," he formally introduced his companion. Philip bowed affably, and the woman, smiling, suggested that he simply call her Delena. Hearing her speak like that, Ellen was taken aback. In the book, Delena spoke completely differently. There she was, too shy to talk to Philip. Maybe because of her, the plot changed a little. Despite the imminent divorce, kissing another woman's hand in front of his wife was too much, the Countess decided, watching as Delena extended her hand to the Count. However, before doing anything, Philip looked back at his wife, who had opened her fan to hide the emotions on her face. And instead of kissing the woman's hand, Philip merely shook it lightly, asking if Enoch had said anything nasty about him along the way. "On the contrary, he only admired you," Lady Sora said, confused. "Serves you right," Ellen thought. "Wait until you get a divorce before you start playing games." At this time, Philip introduced his wife, Ellen Morris, to the guests. The women bowed ceremoniously to each other, saying it was nice to meet each other. Delena's look was very strange, as if she was barely holding back laughter, and Ellen realized with alarm that the woman was laughing at her. Philippe's friend, Enoch, also noticed that he and Madame had not seen each other for a long time and extended his hand in greeting. Ellen also extended her hand to him in response, expecting him to kiss it. However, her hand was intercepted by a strong hand. "My favorite tune is just playing. Let's dance some more, madam." It was Philip Morris. He also asked Enoch if he wanted to dance with his lady, to which he of course agreed. As he led his wife to the center of the room, Philip mentally scolded himself for the fact that something was wrong with him today. A new melody began and couples began to dance beautifully. While dancing with Philip, Ellen remarked that it was impolite since an old friend had come, to which the Count replied that it was better to move away before he made a big mistake. Hearing this, Ellen looked at him questioningly. The man explained that he saw Lady Sora's expression and asked if she was okay, then added that he realized that Ellen would have slapped him if he had remained silent. So he took her aside so she wouldn't hit him. He knows her too well. But in reality, a strange feeling of emptiness appeared in her soul. When she realized this, she asked the Count to stop and drink some champagne. The woman then turned and walked towards the table to get a glass. It seems that this place is not for her. She is a villain after all. If she gets involved in the wrong thing, she will doom herself to death. Thinking about this, Ellen put the unfinished glass of champagne on the table and left the room. As she was already descending the stairs into the garden, someone called out to her. Turning around, the Countess saw her faithful knight Mild hurrying after her. Ellen noticed that he had done his job well, and the knight thanked her. But he asked where the lady was going, and when she answered that, she wanted to take a little walk. Mild asked her to wait a little, saying that he wanted to accompany her. A few minutes later, he returned with a pair of comfortable walking shoes in his hands. He noticed that the high-heeled ballroom shoes were not suitable for walking, so he brought her comfortable shoes. "You must be uncomfortable because of your dress. Let me support you," the knight suggested and extended his hand to the lady. And having already put on more comfortable shoes, Ellen straightened up, but then her leg suddenly gave way. The knight grabbed the lady in his arms, preventing her from falling. "Count," a female voice was heard nearby, and the Countess and the knight realized that they were not alone in the garden. They turned to the third man in surprise, while Mild held the lady in his arms. Earl Morris looked at them. The man's gaze was so stern that it was enough to make you scared. "Oh, sorry, we disturbed you," the woman next to him said, who turned out to be Delena Sora. Turning slightly away from the knight, Countess Morris replied that they were not disturbing. And she added that she would rather go. She was seriously planning to leave. "Have a nice evening. I'll continue my walk," she added in a low voice to her husband's amazement. Trying to stop her, Philip said that a special performance was about to begin. But in a tone that did not bode well, Ellen replied that she was not interested, and she was surprised at how clearly she showed her displeasure. Mild hurried after the quickly retreating lady. Philip thought that she had changed a lot. Her manner of speech, her facial expression, even her aura, everything had become different, especially the fact that Ellen doesn't seem to know what a waltz is. Her dancing skills once amazed the entire high society. So, what she said was true. If so, then he would like to know where she was from, how she lived, what she loved. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said anything," Delina, who was standing nearby, said. Philip noticed that she seemed to have misunderstood everything, but the girl still decided that she had caught the Countess in a secret meeting. Beginning to get irritated, the Count replied that his wife was not the kind of person who would do such a thing, and asked what brought her there. Laughing nervously, Delina replied that she seemed to have drunk too much champagne, felt a little sick, and went out for some fresh air. The Count added that Lady Sora probably didn't know the area well, so she shouldn't go far. Philip turned around and said that he was leaving. But before she could take even a couple of steps, Delina Sora's frightened scream was heard. "Everything is fine," Count Morris responded immediately. Delina sat on the floor and said that she was fine, just a little dizzy. The Count asked her to wait a minute, and the girl smiled, anticipating what would happen next. But the man began to leave, asking her to wait, and said that he would bring a servant. Step by step, he moved away from the girl sitting on the floor, never once turning around to look at her. As soon as he was out of sight, Delina rose to her feet and remarked that since he was getting a divorce, he might as well be more simple-minded. But she still won't back down, because he doesn't even know how much she wants him. And besides, he will soon become king. Dusk was beginning to fall on the Maurice estate, and everything around was painted in the pink color of the sunset. Ellen realized that she seemed to have gone too far, and Mild suggested that they go back. But the Countess wanted to rest a little and asked if there was a place nearby where she could sit down. The knight invited the lady to follow him and quickly walked forward. There, in the middle of a small clearing, stood a small wooden hut. "We can rest here," the knight said, adding that he would go first, asking her to wait. Mild knocked loudly on the door with his fist, waiting for it to be opened. Soon, a young man appeared on the threshold, who immediately recognized the knight, and Mild said that the lady needed a place to rest. The young man's eyes widened in surprise when he heard these words. He invited the lady inside the house, noting that it was rather modest, and Ellen realized with surprise that this was Hada's house. The young man invited the lady to sit in the nearest chair, which she did. On the table, Ellen noticed a small basket of knitted toys. Sometime later, the hospitable host placed a tray with a cup of tea and sliced fruit on the table, apologizing for the modest treat. While drinking tea, Ellen inquired about the dolls and asked if he had made them, to which the young man sheepishly replied that he had. "It turns out that Hada has talent, and this could be tried to be sold," the Countess noted. Meanwhile, the party continued, and noticing that it was already getting dark, the Count suggested having a drink inside the house. And Delina suggested that the women change into more comfortable clothes and spend the evening in their home attire. House parties are usually only held with close friends, so this was a great hit with everyone. Philip showed the women a room where they could go and change clothes, and the aristocrats, accompanied by their maids, went to change their clothes. Delina whispered to one of the maids to help her change quickly, because they had other plans. In the end, it took 3 maids to help Lady Delina Sora change her clothes. And then, accompanied by one of the girls, she went somewhere deep into the estate, passing stairs and long corridors. Finally, she came to some door, and looking around in confusion, opened the door and entered the room. Ellen and Mild returned to the estate when the bright moon was already shining brightly. The girl held a small doll with light hair in her hands, thinking that it somehow reminded her of her. This doll was given to her by Hades. The Countess and her faithful knight noticed the silence and thought that the party was already over. Entering the house, the Countess let the knight rest and went to her room herself. However, she didn't have time to leave. She was stopped by Philip, who noticed that she was late. Ellen asked if the party was over, to which the Count replied that everyone had gone inside the house. The ladies changed into more comfortable dresses because Layla suggested having a house party. The news pleased Ellen a little. She was pleased that Layla seemed to be quite sociable. At this time, Philip noticed a small doll in his wife's hands and asked what it was. "This is a doll that Hades made," Ellen replied, showing him the toy closer. In fact, Hyde's knitting skills were known throughout the house, so Philip wasn't too surprised. But he noticed that this doll strongly resembled the Countess, and therefore he became a little embarrassed. Besides, he began to be irritated by why the gardener gave the Countess a doll that looked so much like her. Meanwhile, the maid searched Countess Morris's wardrobe, and Delina hurried to look for her faster since Ellen was already here. The girl even looked under the bed, hoping to find something there, and it seems she found something. Delina immediately rushed to her, demanding to see what exactly she had found. "You've come, Mom," Layla, as always together with her husband, happily greeted her mother-in-law. Ellen asked with a smile that she had heard that they were having a house party, and the girl had invited the Countess too. But the woman sincerely thanked him and said that she would rather rest, since the boutique was opening tomorrow, and she needed to gain strength. She sincerely wished Layla to enjoy her own party, and she invited Philip to join the gentlemen and continue the evening. With these words, Ellen headed to her room, not noticing that the Count was walking right behind her. After a couple of steps, she realized that she was not walking alone and asked Philip in surprise why he was following her. "I want to walk you to your room," the man simply replied, to which the Countess was indignant that this was not necessary. But the Count insisted, and Ellen decided that let it be so. The room was still very close. Throughout the entire journey, Philip kept glancing sideways at the doll in his wife's hands. And finally he noticed that this doll gave him a strange feeling. In response to Ellen's surprise, he added that they were similar, and he did not understand why Haiti gave her a doll. Is he really jealous, the woman thought with horror, hoping that this was not the case. She reasonably noted that they would soon get divorced anyway, to which the man suggested that this might not happen. Ellen was taken aback by his words. And besides, they were already approaching the door of her room when something else made her surprised. Lady Delina Sora and her maid emerged from the door of her room as if nothing had happened. The women also noticed that they had been discovered and were quite scared. But maintaining an aristocratic calm, Delina silently waited until her maid carefully closed the door of the room. And then, with an ingratiating smile, she pretended that she had just seen Count Morris. Philip, flushed deeply from his conversation with his wife, turned away, and Ellen asked in surprise why Lady Sora had left her room. "I was looking for the room where the party was taking place and found a girl." And then, with a saccharine smile, she turned to Count Morris, asking him to show her the way. "There are a lot of men there, so you'd better see the lady out." Ellen turned to her husband, and Philip had to agree. Wishing Ellen a good rest, the man smiled at her very sweetly, so much so that she thought that he shouldn't smile like that because Delina was his future wife. Lady Sora wished the Countess a good rest, and Ellen responded in kind. And only Count Morris looked very upset that his plans had been thwarted. "Let's go, Lady Sora." Even the man's voice betrayed all his sadness. Ellen headed to her room, and Delina, relieved, went with the Count. Stepping over the threshold of her room, the Countess wondered what Delina was doing here. It didn't look like she had come in here by accident. She looked carefully through the whole room. It seemed that nothing was missing, and there was nothing special to steal. The woman's gaze stopped on the bed, or rather under the bed. After all, that was where she kept her safe. To test her guess, the Countess sat down next to the bed and reached for the safe. Soon, a large box of jewelry appeared from under the bed. As soon as Ellen opened it, she immediately realized what was missing. There were many precious ornaments and other valuables inside the box, but one compartment was empty. "So you decided to play big. I don't know why you stole it, but it's too late," she mentally addressed Delina. The new day that had arrived promised to be full of events. It was the opening day of Countess Morris's boutique, and Ellen had dressed up for the occasion. "Good morning, madam. You had a good time." Her faithful knight and faithful dog met her at the carriage. "Except for one person who made me angry." "Then yes," the woman answered, and became a little angry at the memories. A surprised Mild asked if he could sort this out, and the Countess replied that perhaps not. Then the faithful knight asked for forgiveness, and the Countess remarked that he had no reason to apologize for this. "Now get going, first day of work," Ellen ordered, and the carriage set off. Delina Sora, I'm watching you. Ellen thought she was ready for anything. She stroked Blanc, saying that from today on he would be the mascot and security guard of their boutique, and his salary would be 2 huge bones. Soon the carriage arrived at the main entrance, where servants were already standing waiting. With their help, Countess Morris got out of the carriage, holding the hem of her dress. She noticed that the servants were very nervous and mentally encouraged them, because she was sure that everything was not so bad. The girls' craftswomen also came out to meet her and greeted the lady with a smile. "Well, is everything ready?" Ellen asked excitedly. And the girls replied that the windows were decorated. The cafeteria was also ready. Everything was ready for opening. After examining the area, the Countess noticed flowers in the decorations, which she had not said anything about, and asked where they were from. One of the girls said that the Countess had previously mentioned fields of beautiful flowers, and the people she had sheltered had brought them as a gift for the opening. Realizing that it was a gift, Ellen beamed and thanked him with all her heart. She was very pleased. The girls were also happy that the mistress was pleased with their work. It was time to begin the opening, and Ellen was fully prepared. But then the Countess's gaze and hearing caught something that was clearly missing. Nearby on the street, a street musician was playing the violin. The young man played the melody so delightfully that Ellen decided that there had to be music. The Countess asked Mild to bring a musician to play at the opening and to pay him generously. As she gave the final instructions, Ellen reminded them that when she gave the signal, they were to remove the canvas from the sign and windows. And so the opening began, and a beautiful violin melody began to sound in the courtyard of the boutique. "Mommy, we've arrived," came Layla's voice from the entrance, who, as always, was with Marlborough. "My dear, I am here too," said the voice of Prince Alexander of Bourbon. "And I, madam." Ellen heard a man's voice and turned around in surprise. Seeing the man, she was horrified. Why did he dress like that? Because now they seemed to be in paired images. An embarrassed Earl Philip Morris said he had picked out an outfit to match her dress and asked her how she liked it.